found its bits by the golf.
Wait, is Nosferatu in the room?
How do you do Ben?
Podcast is life.
I do the podcast.
I can't stop doing Nosferatu. It is a problem.
Yeah.
No, I think that was a very good Ben Kingsley in Schindler's List.
Oh, that was supposed to be Ben Kingsley?
Well, who else was it supposed to be?
I was like debating whether to put the word bits in the quote because I was like,
job.
Well, no, because I was like, look, this might be a more serious episode. No bits. And then within 15 seconds, we're doing Nosferatu.
Yeah, we're going to keep the Becker talk limited to like a tight 20 this episode.
20.
I am also a fan of Becker.
If we're doing Decade of Dreams, Becker Talk is in the top 10 most hated sections of any episode ever that people will not stop bringing up.
But then there's the 10%ers who are like, wish they do more Becker talk.
Yeah. I like the Becker run.
Come to my castle and watch Becker with me for an entire night.
I think they should have talked about the movie less.
We could get into all the ways that Count Orlok is coded as Jewish and the legacy of those characters
so
from the
much
history
to
of
talk
vampire
about.
cinema.
Well, guys,
if you really want to.
Count Orlok isn't coded in like the original Nosferatu. It's pretty plainly painted on.
I'd say in the,
and that movie was made as, I'm checking, what am I going to? Germany? Wait, what's this country?
Which decade, though?
Don't worry. It must have been after the World War II stuff, right? Oh, no, way before. Cool.
Would you mind turning on the light switch for me? It is the Sabbath.
Cut all of this out. This is a terrible way to introduce. What if Spielberg listened to this episode?
Oh, he's definitely bailed by now. he's already writing worded letters.
He didn't even get to hear me meta acknowledge him listening.
We've done 2 fucking series on his career, not to mention all the new release episodes, and he was like, I just want to see how they handle Schindler.
Yeah,
I've heard a lot about these guys.
They've taken a lot of swings.
Yeah. And I haven't bothered to listen until now.
Is this the first time that somebody has been on 2 episodes about the same filmmaker?
Good point.
Oh, no. Let's go through. But this is a good list.
This is a good list. Sorry, I'll stop.
Lawson was on both.
Lawson did Saving Private Ryan and Always.
Right.
Fuck the guy. Well, Always is not aired yet. I'm at the time of recording, I think you guys have only gone up through E.T.
Correct. Ehrlich has done now will have done
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and an inferior film in Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Well, we'll determine its inferiority at the end of this episode.
Here's my question though. Are you two the only two to have been on both parts? And if so, if not, has anyone done 2 masterpieces? Because I think both of you guys have gotten 1 uncontested masterpiece and 1 kind of left-handed oddball movie. Is that fair to say?
Oh, you mean within this Spielberg
Within the 2
series.
parts of Spielberg.
I believe those are the only 2, Griffin.
Wow.
I think Left-Handed Oddball is too generous to Always and rude to Indiana Jones' Kingdom.
Okay, well, that's what I thought you were going to say.
Hello.
Our energy today is normal. I don't...
Look, I'm
about to get silly.
excited to talk about this wonderful film with you, my friends. I just had a big bowl of noodle soup and a couple peanut butter cups, which is not 2 foods that matched up, but that's how it went today for me. And here we are. Introduce the show, please.
Look, this is Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
And I'm David.
Great. We're certainly not nervous about how to talk about this.
No, I haven't been like sweating bullets for 8 months since Sims texted me when I was on the treadmill. And like put this like a cross to bear on my shoulders.
There was no question you were doing.
I entrust you with speaking to the legacy of all the Jewish people.
Because Sims, I was like, how are we going to handle Schindler? Do we just do that without a guest? And he was like, no, Ehrlich really wants to do it. Ehrlich's got a lot to say.
Ehrlich and I have had, please finish that. I'm David.
Podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear and sometimes they bounce. Baby. It's a pretty wild clear. This is...
Yes, but obviously one of his more passionate projects.
Yeah, but a passionate project that makes $96 million domestic, wins many Academy Awards, including finally his only Best Picture win, his first Best Director win. It is the movie that, in terms of this half arc we have done, Podrasic cast, the early films of Steven Spielberg, this is, for zoom out, the narrative has been a man trying to figure out how to grow up, right?
Of course.
And I think that you guys chose a pretty natural point to split the filmography, but I also don't think it's possible that in the history of Hollywood filmmaking, there has never been a more distinct inflection point in a filmmaker's career.
Your lovely wife's birthday was last weekend. and we were talking.
Introduce who he is.
David Ehrlich.
Thank you.
Decade of Davids.
IndieWire, Fighting in the War Room, Decade of Davids.
David.
And we were talking about this exact idea and just saying like, man, I know why we justified starting where we did 7 years ago, but man, has that paid off beautifully.
It paid off beautifully
now.
because imagine if we had one more episode to go and it was The Lost World. Like that doesn't make sense as an end point.
And he has the 4-year break and he has the DreamWorks. Like, but the
What do you
inflection
think
point
he did
is
in those 4 years? Jacked it.
he set up like a fucking LLC. Like he was just starting
He
a
finally
studio.
set up that LLC. He called his account. He was like, I think I should set up an
business
LLC.
time.
But I also want to clarify that we were not talking about Schindler's List just because we were about to record this episode, but that's just always what I'm talking about at any birthday party that I
have
attend.
had a lot of drunken conversations about Schindler's List over the years, and that is why I immediately thought of you for this episode.
It is-
Also, you've
look,
been on the show before.
It's my go-to subject whenever there's a lull in any
He sure has.
conversation, really.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It is kind of the Schindler's List of movies, I would say.
It's one of them.
Look,
Top 5.
I was thinking this while watching it. It is one of those films where it's like used as shorthand almost in a like monolithic way to represent like a larger idea of a type of movie.
You
Not
mean
just
like-
the film itself, but like the cultural reputation of the movie.
Like a prestige, sort of gotta see it,
The way
historical
people
classic.
will say like, look, it's no Citizen's Kane. It's Citizen's Kane.
Citizen Kane.
Why
is
am
the
I
name of the-
fucking Schindler's
Citizen
listing everything?
Kane.
The way people will say it's no Citizen Kane or going like, look, they're not trying to make Citizen Kane here. I feel like Schindler's List has a similar kind of shorthand for like serious, well-made movie.
But I think that
Deeply serious.
it has as much to do with the film's quality as it does with the fact that it's become synonymous with the historical event that it depicts. In a way that it will get into it, but it's sort of like inextricable now from our visual idea of a portion of World War
Right,
II,
and
specifically
like,
the Holocaust.
Throwing out like Come and See is like, no, that's a deeper cut letterbox nerd joke for a movie that is like purposefully kind of challenging to watch versus Schindler maybe being the most successful movie that is this difficult ever. Like the most mainstream movie that is this challenging and upsetting.
I can't begin to reckon with what that list is. Sorry. I mean, I guess I sort of know what you mean. I'm trying to think of like, what are other mega upsetting films that became somewhat appointment?
Bohemian Rhapsody,
Yeah, so true.
Wicked.
Now, wait a second.
I know I can't back up that statement, but you get what I'm
yeah,
saying.
I know what you're saying. Of
Where it's like
course.
you can make the reference of like, look, it's like Schindler's List or whatever, and everyone knows what you're saying, which I do think perhaps in the last 15 years has started to become an albatross around this movie's neck.
I would actually, I mean, again, we'll get deep into it, but I think we're on an interesting part in the arc of Schindler's List's reputation and esteem and place in the culture right now, because I think it was freighted with a lot more baggage immediately after its release, and now is reclaimed is way too strong a word for a movie that already occupies the place that it does in the public imagination. But I think it is easier with distance to appreciate
people watch it and they're
virtues.
like, oh, this is
Yeah.
fucking good.
Right. I
movie.
feel like it had 15 years of basically being like,
Homework.
well, but also just like undeniable, kind of like largely uncontested. This is one of the great movies. Spielberg like proved himself, shut down all the haters. I think about
It is one of the great shut down all the haters movies.
It is.
Sure, shut down.
I mean, he
those
created a lot of
haters.
new haters in the process,
sure.
among like the Jewish intelligentsia in particular.
Yeah,
but he
Hanukkah.
shut down a lot of them.
Yes. I think about the original AFI Top 100 list, which I want to say came out in like 98 or 97. And Schindler made the top 10. And going over that list with my parents and being like, whoa, they put a movie that recent in the top 10. And my parents, who are noted Spielberg skeptics, were like, yeah, but it's Schindler's List. There was this feeling of
It's
this,
just very interesting to see Griffin's relationship with this
Right?
movie so far.
but that's stuck in my
Which
head.
is basically like, it's the word you use for a serious movie, and it really crushed in the AFI Top 100.
But I'm talking about this immediate canonization, which I then think turned into it being like homework, which then turned into a notion of like, Well, like Spielberg doing the Holocaust. Is that thing like...
I like how in Griffin's head, Spielberg's relationship to Schindler's List, how it's somehow separate from him, is kind of similar to Griffin's relationship to his own lateness.
Oh,
and
wow.
that, like, it's
We're going right there. We're going right to this.
Before you came here.
Well, you guys talk. You guys say stuff.
I will say the first Oscars I really remember watching is the 94 Oscars for the 93 films of 93. And I remember,
You're like 7?
Yeah, it would have been almost 8. And like a lot of those 90s Oscars are defined by movies that sort of sweep. So Schindler, English Patient, right? Titanic, where you're watching a 3+ hour ceremony where it's like, okay, time for another award. Schindler's List again, obviously, let's keep it going, And I do remember being like, what, because it's like, I'm watching the Oscars. People are laughing and dancing and, and then occasionally they'll play like very somber black and white footage and someone will come up and be like, this is a very important thing. And I'll say to my parents, like, so what's this movie? And they're like, yeah, we'll get to it later. Look,
it's so hard to
they're not
parse.
mad about it, but they're just like, we can't start to explain the Holocaust.
Let's add another wrinkle to that too, which is like by 1994, if you're a child, right, and you're interested in movies in any way, not only are you like, oh, right, Steven Spielberg, Jurassic Park guy, E.T. guy.
I guess I sort of knew. I was pretty young. I might have known who Spielberg was.
But there are also like 4 cartoon shows that all have Steven Spielberg presents on them that are like dominating 90s pop culture.
This is the Animaniacs guy?
This is...
But no, but
I don't think that was true for me yet. I don't think I knew about Spielberg, the whatever, like
those
what you're talking
shows
about, pop culture
all
creature.
had him baked into the title.
I know, I just wasn't watching them yet, right? Like, when is Animaniacs? All right,
I think it's like 94. I think it's actually
We're
after
watching
Schindler's List.
Schindler's
Tiny
List.
Toon.
But there's a bit in the book that I have in front of me because I always like to bring a prop. I'm also clutching the
You're clutching the paranoia agent symbol of horror and despair.
The giant, pink puppy. It's my comfort animal during this record. But there's a bit in this book by Franciszek Pawlowski, The Making of Schindler's List, which was written before the movie came out, before the author had seen it, where he talks about how some of the young extras couldn't will themselves to be afraid in some of the background scenes because they couldn't imagine a Steven Spielberg movie, those who were familiar with him, like the guy who made E.T.
Like how
scaring them. Right, exactly. I mean,
sure. And I was like, well, clearly you never saw 1941.
But in terms of the Jesus, in terms of the sweepiness of it all, though, I mean, it's so hard to parse Clint Eastwood's delivery when he's giving Spielberg the Best Director trophy because he's like trying to make a joke about how
he tries to give it to a chair, and everyone's like, Clint.
But he's like, oh, big surprise. And he looks at it, but his delivery is so stilted that it sounds out of context like it was a huge surprise because Spielberg had never actually won the award before.
This fuck. I mean, surely Clint Eastwood was happy for... I've never really thought about, like, what is Clint Eastwood's relationship with Steven Spielberg? Have they ever interacted?
When Spielberg...
Right?
When he wins Best Picture, about 5 minutes later, he's standing backstage waiting in the wings, and he hands his Best Director Oscar to Clint Eastwood to hold. And Clint Eastwood just fucking throws it at his head. No, he seems fine. Seems happy. He smiles.
Animaniacs premiered September 1993, so it
was
in between Jurassic and
hotness.
Schindler. It was the new hotness, and Tiny Toons had actually finished its main run.
It's storied run.
It's storied run.
I'm looking at the Oscars of this year, trying to think if there was like any movie I had seen that was nominated, because I remember those early Oscar years when like The Mask had like a makeup nom. I would be like, The Mask better fucking win, and then they'd be like, English Patient. I'd be like, what is this crap?
Children across the world these days, or like this year, are going to be thinking the same thing about A Better Man.
I don't
raging at their televisions.
I don't think I'd seen. I don't think I'd made it to the cinema to see Remains of the Day or The Fugitive.
Had you seen Jurassic in theaters? So that's in the TAC categories.
I don't think I saw Jurassic.
Wow.
Did I? I can't remember.
Also, fucked up that they had Harrison Ford, star of Best Picture nominated The Fugitive, handing out the Best Picture award that year.
They do that all the time.
Do they?
They do that all the time.
Star
They pick
a movie?
That's why, who is it? There's one year that it kind of does. It's a Shakespeare in Love year. Because they have Harrison Ford do it again, thinking that Saving Private Ryan's about to win Best Picture.
Yeah.
And he goes, Shakespeare in Love. And everyone's like, huh? And that was them assuming Spielberg was about to get his, second crown.
He takes 3 Red Hulk pills to prevent himself from hulking out.
He's like grabbing one of the big Oscars, and then he crushes the big Oscar statue with a big red hand.
I was late quote unquote, to seeing Brave New World, to entering
Well,
the Brave
you really
New World?
wanted it to, to matriculate, to stew in our culture for a week or two. You really
uncorked it and wanted it breathing.
Exactly. You wanted those tannins to mellow.
I was astounded that movie is explicitly about a prescription pill refill. That is what that movie is about.
I need my pills, leader. And leader's like, I won't be giving those
in the
to you
proud
anymore.
legacy of the Bourne legacy.
Right. There truly is a
Need my
monologue
chems.
where it's like, Harrison Ford, how did you allow this bad guy to rise to power? And he's like, I needed the pills.
They were so good. He Red Hulked me by mistake.
I guess no one was under the impression that The Fugitive was going to win Best Picture. It seemed like a safe bet. It wasn't like cock up of the
piano was the big
level.
Second.
How many times has Harrison Ford handed out, or that was Best Director, right?
No.
He
Picture.
hands out Best Picture.
He does picture.
I'm saying the pianist year. He does.
The pianist year?
He is the one who announces Roman Polanski.
Oh, is he? Oh,
for
I'm
director.
sorry. Okay, you're switching to
I
a
was
different
switching
one.
that. Okay. I was trying
All
to
right, well, I can tell you Harrison Ford has announced Best Picture 3 times to Schindler's List, Shakespeare in Love, and of course, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
More
So
words
did
than
I.
he said in a row in several on-screen performances.
And also coming to you Everything Everywhere All at Once, me on streaming television. I'm in everything, everywhere.
all at once.
All at once. Give me my pills.
Yeah.
Who's done it the most, you ask? Nicholson, 8 times.
Do you think they might get him back this year? Post 50th SNL appearance?
I look, I'm really happy. It was lovely to see Jack for a moment. Didn't strike me as a guy who's ready to like say more than a couple of words.
What if
on
he
camera
came out and announced that Best Picture was going to Adam Sandler? That they were like, oh, there's only
It's only
he can
one
only
thing
say
he
the
can
one
say at this
thing
point.
now.
I hate to, I hope he's doing well. Nicholson announced Best Picture 2, The French Connection,
Mhm.
Rocky.
Wow, starting that early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how fucking major he was, I
Yeah,
guess.
already.
And
Yeah.
also, he was just always there. They were like, "Come up, hey, you're in the front row." Rocky, Annie Hall, Driving Miss Daisy, which he did with Warren Beatty. Beatty was probably trying to like say it was Do the Right Thing or something, like reading from the back of the envelope. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was Faye Dunaway who fucked up that thing. Okay, Unforgiven, then a long rest. Then he comes back to say Crash, which I'll never.
And he holds up the 2 fingers.
Yes. And then the next year he did announce The Departed with Diane Keaton.
Conflict of interest.
How dare he?
We're back in this zone.
But he doesn't remember being in The Departed, if you've seen that performance. Then I have no memory of this. He gave it to Argo with Michelle Obama?
Oh,
Was Michelle Obama like teleconferencing in
Yes.
or something?
Yes, he
Okay.
comes out on stage and presents Michelle Obama live, surrounded by military vets. I wanted active military.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
No memory of that. The thing about Best Picture is you're really tired by that point, and the show is kind of rushing it at that point. And usually Best Picture is actually kind of a forgotten award because it's some producer who comes up and is like, "Oh, I'm so proud of all the money I spent on the," like it's not always the director.
Look, we're obviously not avoiding talking about Schindler's List, but you pointing out that Nicholson had presented Best Picture twice already by the 70s.
Pretty crazy.
What is the last time someone under the age of 50 presented Best Picture?
Rita Moreno's under 50, right?
I just feel like that award is exclusively saved for living legends.
Lady Gaga, who is only 38 years old, Lady Gaga, who's almost exactly my age,
presented Best Picture?
presented Best Picture to Coda with Liza Minnelli.
Okay.
If you remember, she
Yeah.
was kind of
Yep.
helping Liza.
They balance out to be about 73 on average.
But if you want to go solo,
Yeah.
let's go solo.
Because
Julie-
Liza fits into the living legend category.
Julia Roberts presented Best Picture to Green Book, which we all remember so well.
Jesus.
She would have been about 50.
Okay.
Like 50-51.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of on the cusp there.
Mhm.
Sean Penn, we all remember, gave it to Birdman and was like making jokes about him being an immigrant or whatever. And everyone was like, it's his ribald sense of humor.
Right. He said, like, check his green card. Or whatever.
Okay.
And people were like, don't, please.
He would have been like,
He didn't mean it
mid-50s.
rudely. They're friends. They love joking like they did on the set of 21 Grams. Sorry, go
Tom
on.
Cruise presented to The Artist. I remember none of these.
Yeah.
And
these are
he was
blurs.
about 50. So
Yeah.
it's like, I feel like it's when you hit 50.
I think so too.
You're sort of like, it's kind of like, all right, welcome.
It's like you're 50 and you've been a movie star for 3 decades. Congratulations, you're officially part of the tapestry.
Denzel gave it to No Country for Old Men right around the age of 50. Mm-hmm. Kirk Douglas, when he gave it to Chicago, I remember he was like 22 or 23 years old, right? He's the one who goes, and the Oscar, like, and the winner is, like, he he says the old way of saying
Oh, sure.
rather than "and the Oscar goes
Right, and then he
to."
said, "Merry Christmas."
Right.
Famous Jew. I don't know what that joke is. Yeah, Ehrlich, I feel like you have things to say.
I mean, I was just hoping that we'd still have some time for some Becker talk because I have some thoughts. I've really done a deep dive since
Let's
the
save it for the end of the
go ahead.
episode. And here's a promise
No,
also.
I-
End of
when I
this
was-
episode, we're ranking every single Steven Spielberg
And
movie.
we're ranking every season of Becker.
I was basically just lost in thought, imagining if on the set of 21 Grams, Alejandro González Iñárritu needed a phone call from Adam Sandler or Robin Williams every night just to cheer him up, similar to Spielberg on Schindler's List.
Iñárritu's like a soul vampire, though. He probably was making 21 grams and being like, "This is making me stronger. More misery. Just put the camera pointed at Claire Duvall for a minute. She's gonna cry. I don't know. I'll fit it into the movie somewhere."
It is funny that is quietly maybe like one of the biggest parts of Schindler's List's lasting legacy.
The lore around it of like, he was editing Jurassic Park. He needed phone calls from Robin Williams to cheer
Robin
up.
Williams would just do a jazz set over the phone for an hour every night to keep him above water.
I mean, that's some serious heavy Jew work, like having to get on the phone every night and talk to Steven Spielberg and like do a tight five just to keep him off the brink, you know?
But it's also the Spielberg thing where he's like, "Yeah, I called my friend to kind of cheer myself up. My friend, Robin Williams, circa 1993. Like, it's like I'm friends with the most funny person of the moment or
Okay,
whatever.
can I throw out a big take? And this ties into this that I had watching it again last night. This feels to me like the kind of movie that fundamentally cannot be made in a world with cell phones anymore.
Wait. I don't know.
Explain.
Even that anecdote is pointing to something which is like the level of like immersive concentration around this movie, right? Like, not that they were like method living the Holocaust, right? But the way he talks about it, of like, we were really trying to like evoke something. And there is like a disciplined, sober focus to the idea of like bringing this thing like back in front of lenses that I feel like the second anyone is able to like after cut check their cell phone,
Yeah, I mean,
there is a mood and a tone that is
Again, this is
sustained
a
in this
very-
film
Yes.
I think speaks to him being like, I need to call Robin Williams at midnight because I've been living in this for 12 hours without break, versus being like,
I'm not accusing Spielberg of being performative at all. I also just think that there is a whole, like, how do you do press for a Holocaust movie?
yes.
You have to kind of acknowledge whatever, like, oh, it's so hard and serious. And like, you don't want to be like, oh, we were fucking
he's
cutting it up on
also-
set.
And I don't want to be disingenuous or unkind towards Spielberg, but I do think he's also happily performing the act of making the great film that is going to
He's really good at
catapult him into a
selling
new
everything.
level of scam.
But he really sold how serious and how grown up he was making this movie, which I think he was.
I agree
Like,
with you.
But I also want to say, like, to Griffin's point, I think it feels more pressing to me that there would be less of a need to make this movie in the age of cell phones, because so much of what is galvanizing this production is the act of sort of concentrating, collecting memory and serving as much of an arc in its production.
We just had an incredible movie about the Holocaust that kind of felt like it was made without cell phones.
The Boy in the Striped Pajamas? No, but I...
The zone of interest.
We'll
I'm
get
not-
there. But
I'm not saying you can't make a movie about the Holocaust
Kind of
in a
feels
world
like you
with
did
cell
just
phones.
say that.
I'm saying that I feel like there is a type of like, and it's less about how much Spielberg was suffering and living in this world, which I do agree he like not overstates, but that is part of the narrative behind this film, which he's very good at selling his own like mythology.
And the making of
mythology
Schindler's
of the
List book
movies.
makes the set sound positively buiant. So I think a lot of this may have
I
been
feel like
a
there was a
little bit
one
inflated.
for all for one vibe on this set too, right? Of like, you know, this isn't an ego thing, right? Like, there's not really any stars in this movie. Neeson is, you know, a little famous. Ralph Fiennes is not at all, right? Like, it's
And
like
Ben
sort of-
Kingsley is the biggest,
which is
the
crazy
biggest star
that
on
he's
set, but-
in the movie in a way, although he had quickly become a character supporting guy.
But what you pick up when you're reading about, you know, day-to-day life on the set of this movie is that every day there would be another one of the Schindler Juden who would come to set, and these will be people who may have been thought dead or have been off the radar, and who were summoned like moths to the flame to the production of this movie that sort of reconstituted the collective identity of this people and this group and of what Schindler was able
Griffin,
to do.
Jojo Rabbit, there's a movie that feels like there's no sort of cell phone influence on set.
Here is what I'm trying to say. I think more than anything is the level of like sustained concentration this movie has, that more than anything is like holding on to a feeling without overstating it. that feels like it very much makes sense with what you're just saying, of like daily reminders of this is what we're doing, that is less about Spielberg, because that's his job to stay in it, and more about like, you feel like the entire crew was on the same wavelength, you know? That like the hundreds and thousands of background actors were all on the same wavelength in a way that I just like, as someone who now works on shitty modern productions, and you just feel that sense of like, they call cut and everyone goes off and they're like, I got to check other shit. You know?
Yeah, there was definitely a sense of purpose that was very cohesive on set.
Brutalist feels like a movie where people are checking their cell phones. And I don't say that out of disrespect. All movies feel like that now.
Once again, I just wish the sets I was on these days were run with the professionalism of Schindler's List.
No, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just like, this is what it is. This is how we all live our fucking lives now.
When did
the
you
sense
first
of just like
I'm
shipping
so
out and
happy,
being
though.
like, we're all just gonna fucking focus on making Schindler's List for 70
I'm
days.
so happy that there wasn't like a Universal Studios marketing intern who had to come up with
This
TikToks
is
from the set
what
of
I'm
Schindler's List, so
saying.
torpedo their own life.
With
All right,
all
all right,
due
all right.
respect to Reese Feldman, the king of TikTok, he was not sent to Schindler's List
I'm closing the book
to
on
get
this
content.
conversation.
When did I first see
Yeah,
it?
when did you first see
I
Schindler's
think I
List?
first saw it when I was like 14.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And
It was in a, you haven't seen Schindler's List, aren't you supposed to be the movie guy?
yeah,
kind of
I think
framework.
probably was similar for me.
My
Early
friend Doug.
teenhood.
It's like the Jewish equivalent of Hot Fuzz, but you ain't seen Schindler's List.
Basically.
All right,
Yes.
The 5 nominees for Best Director. I'm watching this now. The Oscar clip are Jim Sheridan, Jane Campion, who I think was only the second woman ever nominated.
Correct. After
Muller.
yes.
James Ivory, the god.
Robert Altman, who did not bother to show up.
Robert Altman.
For Shortcuts?
Yeah, for
Yep.
Shortcuts, who never bothered to show up. And Stevie
Shut up for the
Stills.
Gosford year.
Yes, he did, and he looked great. And he hugged Lynchy.
I mean, it's we definitely were feeling that we were doing everything in our power to delay actually confronting this movie and what it is. But I also wanted to preface this episode, at least personally, if only by way of like as a disclaimer for any sort of future glibness that I hope to avoid, of talking a little bit about like how I've lived with this film, and maybe that's true of how other people on this record have internalized this movie over the years. But like I am the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather was 2 of 9 siblings who survived. He left Poland in 1939 as a member of the Polish cavalry on what he described as sort of the last boat out of Poland. It was going to the World's Fair, which was his only ticket out of there. And the rest of his family, like so many of the characters in Schindler's List, did not believe the severity of the crisis that was coming towards them. And so they elected to stay. And my grandfather, who ended up owning movie theaters, and unfortunately, I don't have any memory of talking about Schindler's List itself with him, which I'm sure he played.
Die.
He died in, I don't know, early 2000s. After he lived just long enough to tell me that he was thinking about voting for George W. Bush, which was really difficult. But anyway,
People are so fucking complicated.
I mean, it was all about Israel, and again, we'll get to it. But
We'll get to it.
he was always the funniest person that I knew, and he would always talk about his memories of growing up in Poland and like of the early years of the Holocaust not with like, not as if it were a comic event, but with like a certain levity that he always made it very clear to me that it was important to confront these things honestly and with a hint of, humor, albeit gallows humor, in order to be able to reckon with them and not make it so sacrosanct that it became impenetrable and therefore something that would be allowed to repeat itself. And I don't know. I think that sort of seeped into my relationship with the movie Schindler's List, which I've always talked about, despite what the first 30 minutes of this episode may have sounded like, with a certain like casualness, just because it didn't feel right to hold it in this sacrosanct, rarefied space. And
it does no favors to the movie itself. I think that's the case with basically all movies, and there are other like serious, important movies that have kind of like things like The Godfather are always framed around it's so watchable.
Yeah.
The Godfather's undeniable, despite it being like this like totemic Best Picture winner and blockbuster. And
that's uniquely problematic for Schindler's List in a way. It isn't for The Godfather.
Right. But Schindler's List did play in a similar way. And part of the accomplishment of this movie is, without belittling its subject matter or the import of the messages trying to communicate, the Spielberg X factor is it is so fucking watchable. It is watchable in a way that somehow skirts around being like exploitative, in my opinion. some certain old European filmmakers disagree. But like you watch Color Purple, and that's the first strike of him trying to do something like this. And it's like, he can't stop making it like it's a popcorn movie.
Right. But
and
I also think
he's not doing that. And yet it's got the Spielberg kind of magic of just like, you're so locked into every scene.
I think its power, its lasting power, and its value to me and to the culture at large, and to the memory of the Holocaust lies in how it straddles the difference between those two parts of himself as an artist and also the parts of his career. But I also had like very humble beginnings at the start of this movie, in that I watched it on a 13-inch TV with a built-in VCR in the break room at the school where I taught woodshop one summer. And there's never been a human being less qualified to do that. And so like while Timmy was sitting behind me, like sanding his arm off, I was like locked into Schindler's List on TV and just like watching it over the course of a day. And that was just, I don't know. And when that movie ended, I popped it out and put in like Rambo 2.
Right. You were just like, it's a very well-made movie.
Yeah. But I've seen it, I think, an unconscionable amount of times since then.
I've seen it so many times. It's weirdly a movie that would be on TV. And there's a sort of aspect that we're like, this almost shouldn't be just on TV in between Rambos 1 and 2 or whatever. But I would watch like chunks of it all the time. I've seen it but the first time I saw it, I had the opposite. I was like, I need to know a lot more about that. I guess I knew plenty about the Holocaust in a sort of vague history sense. But when you're watching that, you're just like, I don't understand. Where's this? Where's everyone else? Why don't people know? Or why do people, like I immediately sought much more context. I'm a context-seeking boy.
You're saying the context of the actual historical events?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that was a big,
non-Holocaust.
This is a big part of the motivation for making it, was just the idea that the Holocaust, it was sort of this, twinfold thing that was happening, where I think among Jews, the Holocaust was starting to assume a more central role in the collective identity of the diaspora, because for decades there had been, and again, I'm talking sweeping generalizations, a feeling of trying to sort of minimize and move beyond it amongst our people.
Right, like the Holocaust survivors in my family, it was like never spoken of. And I do feel like that's a bit of a stereotype.
Yeah, I mean, it was part of the idea of founding the nation of Israel, and was just sort of like this idea of trying to move beyond that. And I think its power to be galvanizing for the diaspora was coming into focus at the same time as a decreasing awareness of the Holocaust on the whole among the Goy population of the world, and a rise in people not believing that it happened. I mean, there's a poll or statistic that I read that said in the early 90s, something like 22% of people had expressed sentiments doubting that the Holocaust ever happened.
It's crazy to me when you get to the end of this film and you have the real survivors appear on camera, right, in this very profound, affecting way. And my immediate thought is, God, I can't believe how young they all are, right?
Sure, right. Whereas now it's like there are very few living.
How many are still alive?
I mean, this is the same thing with like how many
World
World War II veterans are still alive. It's a number that dwindled. I remember when like the last World War I veteran died when I was a teenager or whatever. It was like some ancient man.
I remember being in like 8th grade in the early 2000s.
About 245,000.
Close to a decade after this movie comes out. And at my school, they were like, a Holocaust survivor is coming to speak. And like everyone from every grade above, 3rd, this is like required, mandatory, whatever. And it was at that time an old woman who talked about having been a child.
That's the thing. The one Holocaust survivor I know very well is a child. Was a child. She's not currently a child. She's currently a very old woman.
But it's like the fact that Spielberg options this, right, gets Universal to option it, spends a decade being too afraid to touch it, says that kind of the inciting thing in the early 90s was like, I am seeing this level of like denialism starting to grow, along with a kind of like edgelord neo-Nazi kind of normalization. Had no idea how bad things were going to get over the next couple of decades. Yes.
Weirdly.
That it was like, I have a cultural responsibility from my vantage point, my power to get stuff made and communicated, my like megaphone, basically, to make something, to make this feel vivid and present and understandable to people. And then to see the survivors at the end of the movie, and you're like, these people still like have colored hair. Like a lot of them haven't gone gray yet. This is like such
like, these people are kind of hot.
You know what I'm saying? No, you watch this and you're like, it's crazy how much more recent this history was to feel that disconnect from it versus now.
He should have shot the scenes at the end there in Israel, like Coralie Farge shot The Substance, just like really slow motion.
I think it is very interesting to watch this movie now, as there are like 4 or 5 huge tracks of what is happening in the world around us that echo this movie and the events that this film is representing in different ways that are terrifying, that feel like going back to this question we have of like, how does this happen? What do you mean? How does this just happen overnight? And this movie is really trying to break down like the steps of understanding psychologically, like through a certain little prism. I think that's what's smart about it.
Yeah, this is not a history of...
No, I don't think it's its main goal. And I think through picking one specific story, it does find a way to dramatize in certain ways the gradual shifts of how these things happen. But now what's scary is you're just sort of like, this feels far enough away from our present that people are losing their connection with it in the classic, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it kind of way. And the fact that it felt so urgent to make Schindler in the 90s is wild to me, when it's like, this is still kind of fairly new.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Spielberg's own trepidation in approaching the subject matter, again, very metatextually reflected in our own approach to the start of this episode. Very good job, boys.
I think so. Right. Can we just make Jurassic Park quickly before we have to go off and do this?
And also, I think, the distance between the 90s and the Holocaust has been compounded in interesting ways between the distance between the release of Schindler's List and today, in a way that we'll talk about, especially in relation when you look at some of the reaction to Schindler's List at the time. And I think also all those things you're saying about it being the right time to make it, it does. And again, I don't mean to be a cynic about it, but I do think he was sort of at a point of his career after Hook, after Always, these movies that weren't really connecting. I mean, Hook is the ultimate, it's time to fucking grow up movie. And, whatever its charms. While I haven't listened to that episode yet, I have to say, this miniseries has been revelatory in so many ways. Like Dan Candyman is from Montreal.
That's big.
I never would have known.
I told him people were going to like the lore drops, and he was pushing back. He said, cut it down. And I said, they need to know he's Canadian and part of a polycule.
One thing Dan Candyman is always saying is, oh, cut that down. You should cut that down.
That really blew my
Poldek Pfefferberg. I'm cutting off. And we're going to the dossier.
Can I say something off of what Ehrlich just said, and then you can crack open the dossier? Talking about this inflection point, a anecdote I found very interesting is that Sid Sheinberg, when he was negotiating to do Schindler and Jurassic, was like, you have to do Jurassic first.
I feel like that is also a huge part of Spielberg selling this movie, is that's something I've known my whole life. Like this lore of like, he had to do Jurassic first because he never could have done it after making Schindler's List. He had to call Robin Williams. He was editing Jurassic Park on like a video,
I think it was
like
a lot further along
teleconferencing
than
feed.
that. I think he was mostly just doing the mix.
He was doing the final stuff.
George Lucas was quietly overseeing a lot of the special effects.
Was overseeing some of the mixing and right. All this stuff where you're just like, right, this is all Janusz Kaminski, in my head it's like, yeah, there was like a newsboy on the streets of Krakow and Spielberg sort of discovered him, like all this stuff.
It'd be funny if George Lucas was like, can I just pitch in on Schindler's, on the crowd control there, and someone else can do Jurassic Park?
But I think the subtext of what Sheinberg was saying was not just like, look, after Schindler, it's going to be hard for you to mood pivot back to Jurassic. I think there was this notion of, if you pull this off, it's going to fundamentally change you as a filmmaker in a way where it's going to be harder for you to ever go back to that. Which I think
the next movie he made was a Jurassic Park.
But I think,
do you think it was the rationale there was
the same,
as artistically motivated as much as it was, do the thing that's going to make us $1 billion first. I think get that done, and then you can go do your fancy black and white little art project.
Do the thing that comes out in the summer before the thing that comes out at Christmas.
I think part one is, if you pull off Schindler, it's going to change you forever. 2 is, please just give us the safety movie before you cash in the blank check, right? And the third part of it is, if you fuck up Schindler, it's really going to stick to you. I think if you
there was no way he was going to fuck up this movie, but there was a possibility. I think Spielberg thought that it would be a less seen movie,
that it was Empire of the Sun.
Yeah. That it would be, it's a 3-hour drama with a lot of Polish.
I do think there are ways. I do think there are ways he could have fucked this movie up.
Well, obviously, he could have fucked it up, like, in my opinion. But I don't think people would have been like, F, what a stinker.
I think if he fucked it up, though, it would have been like, conclusively, he is not a grown-up filmmaker.
Right.
The ego.
He can't handle it.
I mean, I admire him for having the chutzpah to make this movie, to take on so transparently the weight of what this project entailed. But the ego required to be like, I can do this. I'm going to do this. It's extraordinary. And I think that if the movie had disappointed the people that it was meant to represent, en masse, it would have been a really difficult blow for
He had already made Empire of the Sun,
which people didn't like.
I don't know if
Empire of the Sun got good reviews, made okay money, got some Oscar. Like Empire of the Sun did okay.
If Schindler had gone over the way Empire of the Sun did, I think it would have been
a big blow.
If Empire of the Sun had been a disaster, he could have gone home for the holidays without having to hide in the closet. I think that
guys,
I think that
we're getting into a very similar argument here. I'm just trying to say, he had made grown-up movies; they had gone over okay. It's not like he'd never made a grown-up movie before. I'm just worried we're narrativizing this a little too much.
I'm gonna stand by this. I think if Schindler had gone over the exact same way as Empire of the Sun, the response would have been, okay, for every 5 blockbusters you deliver us, you can make one of these. Versus this being the time where
we need a Schindler's List every 6 months from now on.
Anything Spielberg makes becomes this important, whether it's a dinosaur movie or a Holocaust drama.
Sure. I mean, there's nothing like what happens after you make Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year.
Correct.
No one will ever do anything like that again, probably.
I mean, have you guys gone deep on his predilection for making 2 movies a year?
We've talked about it so much, but mostly on the other miniseries because he kept doing it more and more.
It feels like this rhythm that must work for him. I mean, for whatever reason, he's done it 4 times. Obviously, it's over now.
Now he's slowed down. But yeah, I think it's a tonal balance thing. And it
worked, so why not try it again? Right? It worked here, so why not do Amistad and Lost World? That didn't work out perfect. But then Catch Me If You Can, Minority Report, that works out pretty good.
I mean, the ending of the Making of Schindler's List book is just and it's just been announced. He's about to make Amistad, and it's going to be Schindler's List all over again. And they were just waiting for the next great American epic.
Munich and War of the Worlds, sort of like a on-base single version of it working out.
And then Tintin and Warhorse.
Which is sort of okay.
He just did it 5 times. I think part of it is in the same way that the making of this movie is Spielberg being I need to tie my arms behind my back a little bit to limit myself and challenge myself and put some restrictions on my filmmaking language and all of that. The way Soderbergh talks about the compression of time, of crew, of setups.
All Soderbergh wants is faster.
But part of that is he's in order to stay sharp, I have to make this challenging for myself. I have to put restrictions on it because both Spielberg and Soderbergh, I think, are so fast in their kind of brain processing of these things that I think for Spielberg, it helps him to be I need the challenge of the other movie to feed in.
Yeah, sure.
I'm so happy Soderbergh didn't make Schindler's List. Would have edited it on the train ride home, and it would have just been musty colored frames of.
It all actually just takes place in an office, one office room.
But I do think it is a self challenge, right? It's sort of this feeds.
For Spielberg,
sure. Say one movie ends up informing the other movie in a way I'm surprised by.
Yeah, I mean, he was working in a radically different way than he'd ever worked before. I mean, he was working with, first of all, with a predominantly Polish crew. I mean, it's his first movie with Janusz
storyboarding,
handheld camera, which he's often carrying himself.
And he's literally
he's got his biggest dick star ever.
Oh, yeah.
Evian bottle.
He's having to deal with that.
The kind of dogmatic, I'm not allowed to use Steadicam. I'm not storyboarding. All these things where he's just I'm banning pieces of equipment. I'm banning the approach of how I conceive of scenes.
Poldek Pfefferberg, Polish-born Jewish man who survived the Holocaust, thanks to the efforts of Oskar Schindler. This is where his story begins. He emigrates to the United States in 1948, temporarily changes his name to Leopold Page, starts a leather goods store in Beverly Hills, continues to know Oskar Schindler. As people who know about this probably know, Oskar Schindler sort of survived on the goodwill of the Schindler-Juden, later in life when he was a broke.
They were Venmoing him every month.
Truly.
It was the Little Caesar CEO paying for Rosa Parks' apartment.
Yes, exactly.
That's real. It sounds like me just making a dumb joke.
I was wait, did Griffin just tell a joke? But then I was no, that can't be. Starting in the 50s, he's someone should make a movie of this. This is a good idea for a movie. What happened to me? What Oskar Schindler did.
I think also was how do I repay this man?
Yeah, sure.
Perhaps he needs to find a vehicle to forever pin him in the annals of history.
a deal is reached to make a film called To the Last Hour, possibly starring Sean Connery as Oscar Schindler, at MGM, written by Howard Koch, the writer of Casablanca, one of the writers. And it almost happened, since even like Schindler got a check for $37,000, like, you know, to sort of get the rights or something, dies, you know, doesn't make it. At one point, Pfefferberg approaches Fritz Lang, who must have been quite old at that point, to try and get something off the ground. He goes over to, like, you know, MCA of Germany. He's like, maybe I can make it in Europe. Like, doesn't happen. He dies at the age of 1974.
He dies at the age of
1,900 at the age of 66 in 1974.
Makes slightly more sense.
But a few years later,
Mhm.
Thomas Keneally,
I think
Australian
it's
journalist Keneally, walks into his leather goods store after he's died, and
After Schindler has died, and Pfefferberg is telling everyone who comes in.
David's looking at the dossier
Okay.
like
I
Warren Beatty
misread this.
Story we're
I
going
against the
misread
La
this.
La Land ballot.
I
Schindler
misread
said
this. I'm sorry.
Pfefferberg's alive.
Schindler is the one who died in 1974.
Correct.
Right?
There we
Pfefferberg's
go.
still alive. There, I was like,
Okay,
what?
what are you
Sorry, I misread this.
His disembodied spirit
Okay.
running a
In
store in Hollywood.
1980, Thomas Keneally walks into this leather goods store, and Pfefferberg tells him the story. Like, I was saved by this Nazi called Oscar Schindler.
I mean, you get the sense that anytime anyone came into the store
And,
who was
like,
even like tangentially related to Hollywood,
probably,
he was like,
right.
sit the fuck down.
Yeah.
I'm about to tell you my life story for an hour where I
he
size up
knew
your
at
feet.
this point how to put some, spit on the ball, right? Where he's like, you don't get it. It's not just that this guy was a Nazi. It's not just that he was this kind of like good-looking, charming guy. He was like fucking his way through Germany. He was carousing
He's
and
like
drinking.
a lush and a party
Right.
animal
He's
who
this
was like
interesting guy.
cheap labor.
Right. He starts out with this kind of amoral sort of like, hey, sure, like, you know.
Not to be crass. It is like a perfect Hollywood hook to making a Holocaust
Of course it
movie,
is. Of
which is
course it
just
is.
like guy slowly gains a conscience in the Holocaust and does a great mitzvah.
And Keneally initially is like, look, I'm a Catholic. I'm no expert on the Holocaust. Like, I don't know if I should write this book, but he can't drop the idea. So he writes Schindler's Ark, which, have you read it?
I have not.
It's
I've never had any desire to, weirdly.
it's good. It's a novel. It's like a sort of like fiction, a historical novel, right? So it's sort of written in this way that has, he's using documents, but he's also sort of filling in gaps with and it's good. And it's about, the paradox of this man, right? Like, it's about this person more than anything. It wins the Booker Prize. Spielberg sees the book, had never heard the story before, and is very interesting. And so very interested. So Universal buys the rights in 1982.
And his first response is this real? Like, he's just
It
kind of like,
sounds fake. It
this
sounds Hollywood.
feels like Hollywood bullshit. If this is real, it's incredible. Yeah.
So Spielberg, of course, as we all know from watching that movie, grew up Jewish.
The movie you're talking about is Jurassic Park?
Fabelmans.
Okay.
And knew Holocaust survivors when he was 3 years old. He has a story about like someone coming to the to family dinner and telling stories. His grandmother and whatever. Like he has a vivid memory of someone like rolling up their sleeve to show the tattoo to him with the numbers. But nonetheless, kind of like you were saying, or like generally it's sort of like that's not dinner table conversation. Like we don't talk about Nazis in this house, right? We don't like dwell on it too much. We're happy. Michelle Williams is playing the piano and buying monkeys. Dano's getting cucked all over town.
I mean, like 3/4.
He's got to move states to avoid getting cucked.
3/4 of my family are Eastern European Jews who immigrated to New York State before the Holocaust.
Yeah, in like the
And I
early
feel like-
1800s, probably.
Right.
That's when my family mostly immigrated.
Right. All of my grandparents were first generation,
After
but
the
were born
pogroms.
here.
Yeah.
Right. And it did, I feel like whenever any of them would invoke this era, it was obviously a great tragedy thing, but it did feel like there was this feeling of, we don't even want to touch that. Like, this is too profound and serious, and we're lucky that none of us had to live through that. And there was the kind of general Holocaust museum, nod seriously of course, a great tragedy kind of thing.
I think it must also start to seem unreal at a certain point.
I think
and when you're like living
so.
in America, you're making a life for yourself here.
Things are okay.
It's like this dream that happened to someone else.
It is very bizarre for me to think about like my grandparents being like children and teenagers and whatever, and just hearing that this was happening. And I think, right, you like needed to apply a certain degree of cognitive dissonance to not go insane, especially when you're like a powerless American
but this
child.
Is one thing I wanted to understand when I start learning more, like where I was just like, when did people know in America, say, right? You know, like they didn't know during the war. They knew the war was happening, right? But like they didn't really know the extent of this until after the war. And like, and then how quickly, obviously the Nuremberg trials start to have, you know, like how quickly does this start to come out? Like, is this information widespread? You know, I was just fascinated by the development of all that.
I mean, you can see that chronology take place on screen over the decades.
Is one of the things.
It's one of the things that's so interesting about Holocaust cinema. I mean, it starts. I'm not saying this is the first Holocaust movie, but like I think in terms of just the weight and the gravity of what's happened and sharing that raw imagery. I mean, I think of Alain René's Night and Fog.
Yes, but that's
right in the middle.
50s.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It's pretty soon after World War II. Obviously, you know, in historical terms, we think of soon, it'd be like instant information. It's a decade later.
That's what's hard to think about now, that you had to wait years to really start to get the gravity.
But we started getting Holocaust movies in a relatively modern sense not long thereafter, and great ones. But, you know, we'll talk about in terms of Schindler's List, like none of them had really penetrated mass culture in a way that any of Spielberg's movies ever had. I mean, like, you know, I could wax poetic all day long about Lena Wertmüller's Seven Beauties or about The Boxer in Death or about Capo, you know, and these are great films that have had a lasting impression on me, but only because I sought them out.
Yeah, The Boxer in Death is a Slovak film. Yes. I don't think that one was burned out of the box office.
Screened to me in the Holocaust cinema I took with Annette Insdorf in college, and not something that someone was just going to catch casually on TNT.
No, and then there's movies like The Pawnbroker or whatever, where it's like, this is about a Holocaust survivor. It's about the legacy of this, but it's not about like the history of what happened.
Right.
Great movie.
Right. There are a lot of movies about the kind of the ripple effects and the aftermath and sort of psychological studies.
Universal buys Schindler's Ark, but literally Spielberg says to Pfeffenberg, apparently, it's going to take me about 10 years to make this. Like, he basically knows even then.
And he tried to shop it the whole while.
That's
I mean, it's like De Palma, Scorsese, come on, someone.
For 10 years, he was
released. We're going to talk about that because he says, I needed more films to make more films. I wasn't about to go from Temple of Doom to Schindler's List. It would have been impossible. Right. In my burning desire to entertain, I kept pushing it back. He hadn't had children yet. Talks a lot about how having children kind of changed everything for him.
It is hard to imagine.
Children, he was like, make those guns like flashlights.
It is hard to imagine someone making this movie before they have children. In a way, I mean, it's an unfair.
I think
parent brain thing to say, but
you think you could just? You're like Ben getting the Simple Plan money. You're like, I can make Schindler's List. Point the camera over there.
I could roll out of bed, kidless, and make this movie.
I haven't seen A Simple Plan in a while. Does one of the characters decide to spend all their money on making a Holocaust movie?
I agree with you that this feels like a fundamental, you are not the most important person in the world kind of movie, in a way that Spielberg wasn't always making autobiographical films, but they always felt very tied to his kind of experience and world outlook. Yeah. If that makes sense.
I mean, I think, and what you're seeing in this movie is him, I don't know if the right moment to go like too big picture, but you're seeing the defining interest of his films philosophically go from being about the family, being, you know, stemming from divorce and things of that nature, to in the process of this movie, and literally you can see it in the span of a single scene, becoming about the value of a single human life, which becomes the defining theme of his career. You see it obviously front and center in Saving Private Ryan, then again in AI, and of course in the BFG. So I think that like these are things that I mean,
the value of a single jar of parts.
But yeah, I mean, this is him entering a new phase of his existence as a person, really beyond that's just sort of reflected through the art.
Spielberg, presumably talking about Hook, LOL, says J.J. Bursch, our researcher. I was seduced by my own success. I'd always played to the adult audience who were able to remember their childhood and enjoy the movies along with their own children. But when I began playing to kids directly, I found I stumbled on my own shoelaces. I realized when you're making movies, you can't do things consciously. It's interesting to hear him say that, because Hook is indeed him being like, I'm making like essentially a film for 7-year-olds. And like, sure, he's made E.T. or whatever, but E.T. is sort of indefinable magic, or like, but it's like, yeah, he mostly made movies for like everybody, teenagers.
Hook for the 7-year-old in all of us.
Yeah, sure. 7-year-olds in all of us are always like, I gotta put my cell phone down and stop working so much.
I think it's almost always a problem when filmmakers this talented try to put those kinds of limitations on themselves. Like, not filmmaking challenge limitations, but are like, this is just a movie for kids. And I'm like, well, now you're not playing to the top of your intelligence.
Now you're hurting your own movie. Exactly. Like, I mean, that's what George Lucas, where he's just like, I don't know, it's for kids. And I'm like, this is about senates and shit. Like, take yourself seriously.
It used to be about everything.
Right.
And it used to work for kids as well, which was your magic. The second you're like, well, if adults don't like this, they're not they're up their own ass.
But then again, if I made some fucking movie that made $1 billion and children around the world enjoyed and adults were like, you're a war criminal for making it. I'm talking about like the Phantom Menace. I would be like, well, the warmth of children's love sustains me. I don't need you grown-ups.
We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, but there is, I literally just last night sat down with my son and watched the first 30 minutes of Star Wars A New Hope, which is the 4th film. And I don't know if you guys know.
I think we never got to that one.
He
was Sebulba in it?
Is it a Sebulba picture? Whenever Sebulba's not on screen, Ace is saying,
Sebulba and Nosferatu, those voices aren't that far from each other.
We did this bit about Watto. Watto's the one who's similar.
For the record, during Sundance, when I checked my phone between movies and saw that Watto had died, I immediately texted Griffin with horror in my heart and got nothing back.
And then
I think Griffin got 400 texts along those lines.
We were in the middle of recording. You will not believe how many texts I got. It was more than my birthday. But also, I went texting you today, do you want coffee for the episode record? Only then realized I hadn't responded to your Watto text.
I mean, not that you expect something back when you send someone a condolence call, really, but like, I just needed information. I was like, what's happening? Okay, that makes sense. But
what were you going to say?
I showed Ace the first 30 minutes of Star Wars. I've never in my life fielded more questions about Jawa. I don't think anybody ever has. Or really just the same question over and over and over again, which is, are they bad guys? Which is usually the question.
The thing with Jawas is they're in the right in the gray area, that's one of the first things you meet in Star Wars. Kind of the example of what a cool movie is.
Star Wars is ultimately, one of the reasons that it appeals to children so much is it's this Manichean, however you want to pronounce it, story of good versus evil.
Of course. Yes, I mean, obviously there's a black-clad sadist who appears before the Jawas.
I thought Darth Vader made some good points, but your words, not mine. But I think that, like, you have that good versus evil thing that kids whose only question at this age is, are they a bad guy, can understand. And that, I'm not saying that I'm showing my 5-year-old Schindler's List anytime soon, but I'm saying that, it's an interesting parallel when you're looking at, Spielberg maturing and making a movie for adults. Here he is making the most black and white, morally black and white movie he's ever made. Is the closest thing to the spirit of Lucas in some ways that, aside from maybe Indiana Jones.
Yes, but also building it around like a weirdly gray character in a lot of ways. The quick sidebar, because you guys were starting to get into this before the record, and I was like, we got to fucking get this out on mic. At your wife's birthday last weekend, both of you, we were talking, and the question came up, what is the first Spielberg movie we will show our son? Right? You were like, when will he be? Because it was like, is he ready for E.T.? Will E.T. be the first one we show him? What is the right age for E.T.?
In theory, E.T. should be the first one, but then you kind of get into like, do I want to traumatize my child with
Your wife was like, I'm imagining his response. We maybe have to wait until he's stronger. And I was like, I think part of the rite of passage of E.T. is seeing it a little bit before you're ready.
It's sort of true.
You have to time it out.
I was saying
you can't be too
early. It's also just better than any other movie that you could show your kid that age that has someone dying or getting sick, where it's like they might be upset by that too. But E.T. really,
avoiding the risk for trauma is sort of a futile endeavor, because we're talking about a kid who is currently so scared of everything. We were watching Wreck-It Ralph, and when
someone just perked up.
Great movie, which my daughter calls Angry Man.
What's the name of that actress from Jane Lynch? When Jane Lynch's character shows up,
Sergeant Calhoun.
Yeah, Asa decided that she was absolutely terrifying.
Wait, he didn't even see her shooting bugs. He was out on just the Jane Lynch.
Daddy, you have to pause the movie now. And shrieking at me, and so
you continue to tell me that your son, more than anything, reacts negatively to authority figures in film, threatening to discipline characters. characters.
Yeah. I mean, well, that would paint a picture for your listenership that
I would say that that's
severely
very
disciplined at
absent
home.
from his life.
No, that's what's funny is you're like, if a character comes on screen and feels like they might get angry at the kid, your son freaks out. And you're like, when I try to tell my son to do anything, he laughs.
Yeah,
at me.
maybe the problem is that like I've done such a bad job of disciplining my kid that the idea of having any sort of discipline has become this very alien, traumatizing thing for
Asa
him.
was at my daughter's birthday.
Yes, he was.
And he was very well behaved.
He
was throwing himself from the tops of
I will send you a video where he is having like a demonic possession over in the side of one of the booths and talking about Venom. And I thought he was talking about Venom, the cartoon. And I was like, how did you hear about Venom? And then it came out to me that he was just talking about like being venomized Asa, which is like Asa but poisonous, which is, I guess, poison spider. I was like, okay. More poison spider, less
Venomized is the big initiative in the Marvel universe.
But
going Venom mode?
All the characters are getting venomized.
Listen, who knows what the Eric Adams administration is teaching these kids at school these days. But I do think that, fucking him up with E.T. is fine. What was I going to say? Griffin threw a great pick into the mix, which is The Adventures of Tintin.
I was like, Tintin's a fucking...
Tintin's good because even though it has like guns or whatever, Tintin's pretty, like the stakes are silly.
I also said in the is that a bad guy kind of fear that
they're all bad guys.
Ace is living with. But also with Tintin, you're like, you can tell the bad guys are because of the way their faces look. Like everyone
in Tintin looks normal.
So caricatured.
What about, I mean, I get BFG is also obviously pretty, I mean, it's just.
That would mean I would have to watch the
dorks
BFG
and
again.
losers.
It's a movie for people who want to go
But Ace and I used to,
bedtime.
When he was like 2 and 3, we would do, I don't think this is going to translate at all. And I don't know why I'm just going to keep going with it because there's no mechanism in my mind that can stop these things. But we would do this game when he was young where I'd say like E.T. and I'd stick out my finger and he would stick at his fingertips and I'd go hook and I'd hook his little arm with my finger and I'd go Jurassic Park and he'd laugh and I'd claw at his stomach and then I would always like throw in a curveball just to make myself laugh where I'd be like always and I try to like do something like
Sugarland Express, dust some sugar on that bad boy.
Yeah, I'd be like Warhorse.
Don't show him Warhorse.
Not happening.
He'll fall too
he'd want to fuck that horse too bad. You know?
He's too sexy. NSFW.
But recommended to all the parents.
Thomas, I already for Keneally.
I'm guessing.
Writes the first script. They didn't like it. It was too sprawling. He couldn't figure out how to, whatever. He's a novelist. He's not, So then Kurt, I'm not sure how you say his last name, Ludetka, who wrote the screenplay for Out of Africa. So obviously a recent Oscar winner. He is a journalist. Like he makes a lot of sense in a way, even though Out of Africa is boring. But says that, interestingly, he couldn't find his way into believing what he was writing. He was like, as a journalist, like this almost feels surreal.
Yes.
Like that someone would behave this way. So that's when Spielberg turns to, well, maybe does Sidney Pollack want to do it? Does Brian De Palma want to do it? No. Steve, I love him, but no. Take it back.
I mean, there are sequences
Go back
in
to
this
Brian's
movie
house
that
and take it.
You could easily extrapolate to
filmmaker.
split screen.
Yeah. Does Roman Polanski want to do it? Roman Polanski, a literal Holocaust survivor who survived the Krakow ghetto, and Polanski, I think, did take the offer somewhat seriously, but
here's the guy that want to open this box.
Yes, and he makes The Pianist years later.
Right. If you are a writer being hired by Steven Spielberg to adapt this book and this story, and in your mind's eye, you're like, and then this will go through Steven Spielberg's camera, I think it is tough to figure out how to write it because even looking at things like Color Purple and Empire of the Sun, and the story feeling so kind of like unbelievable on its face, you're like, how do you prevent this from feeling like a magical fairy tale?
Yeah, you can't get in the mindset of writing a Steven Spielberg movie.
Right. How could this fit into his world? Yeah.
Now, Scorsese is the person who really did almost make Schindler's List. Marty Scorsese. You've heard of this guy? Spielberg thought like he's not going to back down from like the truth, the violence, the sort of horror.
Playing sympathy for the devil over the scene when Amangarta shows up.
Here's a more serious, bracing, bold filmmaker.
And like, it's a part, I'm going to guess that this was in sort of like the late 80s, right? When Marty's taking it on. So it's like right around when he's doing like Last Temptation of Christ, right? He's making, strides to whatever, like serious.
Also,
I don't know.
He got a lot of blowback on King of Comedy. He got a lot of blowback on Last Temptation of Christ. Spielberg coming to him and being like, here's a project. that everything that's challenging about it is like challenged because of history in a certain way. You could sort of see him like going like, look, it's something being delivered to me, handed on a plate, supported by the best people.
Here, I have Scorsese for you.
Okay.
I'm being Marty.
Yeah, he's
But Schindler's List, I hired Steve Zalian. So
he's
in the room.
He hires Zalian, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
Steve Zalian, who wrote the script. He says this is around 1990. So it's right after he did Last Temptation of Christ. And I guess it's probably after he has filmed Goodfellas, which comes out in 1990, which is a good movie, but a better pizza brand. As
long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a Nazi.
The whole point of the movie to me,
we're doing great work here tonight.
Was to start a dialogue about something which is still important to me, which is the true nature of love, which could be
This is what
God.
Scorsese said?
This is Scorsese. It could be Jesus. I'm not being culturally ambivalent here. It's what's in us. He says it could be the force. No, he doesn't say that. Is God in us? I really am that way. I can't help it. I like to explore that. I want a dialogue on that. So I did Last Temptation. I did it a certain way. And, I did the best I could. I went around the world. Any arguments, I took them on. But like in the case of Schindler's List, the trauma I had just gone through was such that I felt like I had to tackle this subject matter like so seriously. And he's worried that he's a Gentile and he's not like going to be up for it. Like he mentions that Jewish people have been upset that the writer of the Diary of Anne Frank movie, I guess, was a Gentile. I don't know. Like it's, funny, like controversies long past at this point. But
it is one of those infamous historic sliding doors that Spielberg is seriously considering remaking Cape Fear, which is a real like, Steve, come on, you're avoiding.
I mean, that is it's so funny, right? Like you're totally avoiding this at this point. Where Spielberg's like, should I just like remake some of my favorite movies? Like, because that's what always is as well. Like, it's just like I'm just going to remake these movies I like.
I mean, there were rumors that Spielberg has said are not true, that he and Scorsese effectively traded projects.
I mean, the part of it that's simplified in a way that is kind of incorrect is people missing the context that Spielberg was the one who hired Scorsese to do Schindler in the first place. I feel like the story kind of gets repeated as if like they were just doing separate things in separate silos, and then he called one day and was like, what if we Yankee swap?
Well, supposedly, according to JJ, they did swap.
No, of course they swapped. I'm just saying that it was Spielberg being like, I know I offered you this,
right?
But I'm kind of thinking I should make it.
And of course, Cape Fear.
As repayment, do you want to do Cape Fear? Which becomes Amblin produces, becomes Scorsese's first kind of like mainstream hit.
Yeah, makes money, obviously.
He talks about it being a huge transition in his career to like figuring out how to work within the studio system and all of that.
Right.
It's a big, big movie for him. Everyone kind of wins in this scenario.
Yes.
But I think that the legacy of English language films about the Holocaust, especially American films about the Holocaust, was really working against Spielberg in that it was all the more reason to make the movie, but it was also, part of what made it so daunting. I mean, you have like Theodore Adorno's, declaration that poetry is impossible after Auschwitz resonating in your head. And then you're seeing the Diary of Anne Frank movie and some other things that are really sort of trivializing or making into kitsch the Holocaust in some ways that are played with commercial interruptions from Hallmark or whatever.
Anne Frank feels like the main vehicle for telling stories about the Holocaust in American pop culture for a long, long time. And then you have like Hitler comedies. Like you have like To Be or Not to Be and A Great Dictator and these movies that are made like in progress that are sort of like poking fun at the idea of this guy without really understanding what's going on.
There's some animated movie about Anne Frank where it was like Anne Frank but modern in a way. It was like set in the Anne Frank house and she escapes into the modern world that played at Cannes a few years ago and I saw and reviewed and has never seen the light of day.
What's it called?
Something Anne Frank, I would think. But then the other huge monolith that you have, I think, in recent cultural memory around this time is Shoah. As Claude Lanzmann's film, which is in a way, it definitely wasn't a sort of last word and testament, about the Holocaust or Shoah, but it was a definitive in a way, and also an opportunity for someone like Schindler, or for Spielberg rather, because it doesn't contain a single frame of archival footage. It's all interview testimony. It is the filmmaking in that is fascinating and alive, and like it is another movie that, despite its epic length, does not at all feel like homework. And I highly recommend everyone who has been afraid of it sit down and watch it, because it is a really fascinating and incredible document. But yeah, I mean, so that's the other sort of thing where it's just like it's been kitschy. It's also the most totemic and serious version of this has been done. How do I thread the needle between these two things?
Right. Which is like, there's something tonally he's getting from Showa that is, you don't have to make the stately Hollywood kind of like, and Frank is like a very traditional movie. It is like the conventional mechanism for how, for decades, Hollywood would turn important stories into accessible dramas.
The 59 film with...
Yes. Yes. You know? And like Showa is sort of like, obviously this 8-hour kind of like monolithic art house sensation, kind of like historically important text. But you can see him going like, is there a way to kind of like bridge the gap between these two, have the unbracing like specificity and feeling of Showa and put it in a vehicle that audiences can like go and see?
Yeah, again, I think that's exactly what Spielberg recognized, to his great credit in my eye, is that part of the value of him making Schindler's List is that people would see it more than anything else.
Of course.
I think the things that certain people like to ding this movie for are all part of the strategy of what the intended impact of this movie was, which you can't really argue with because it fucking worked.
And yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of any other movie aside from maybe Saving Private Ryan that so definitively created a visual language for a historical event that is almost dangerous because it becomes so ubiquitous and limiting in that way, because people think of the Holocaust as being sort of visually synonymous as one thing. Just like now, you can't think about D-Day or just like the nature of these ground battles in World War II without thinking of how Spielberg transformed them in our visual memory with Saving Private Ryan. And so, like,
you can't think about
the huge
like
opportunity of this movie, but also the danger. And horses. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Talked over that important point.
No, I talked over your important point.
Scorsese gives up the project. He says, I guarantee you it would have been good, but it wouldn't have been the hit it became. Had some ideas. Most of it's there. It had a very different ending. I admire the film greatly. You know, it's fascinating to consider. It'd be one thing if it was like, oh yeah, he took the movie back from Turtle Tub. It's like, Martin Scorsese almost made this? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Anyway.
We've had so many chances to see the Turtle Top Schindler's List over the last few. No, but it just like many.
The thing about Turtle Top is he's like, I'm going to remake it now. He's like, even though anyway, no, he's Steven Zalian. Spielberg likes the script because he doesn't tell the story from the survivor's point of view, but from Schindler's. And as Zalian puts it, I wanted it clear he didn't do what he did out of friendship. He didn't feel sorry for them. He eventually does it because it's the right thing to do. But Spielberg's like, we do need to longer. We need to broaden out. Yes, it should be from his perspective, but we can, leave his perspective to take in what's happening in Krakow and like happening in the Holocaust around him.
He had like a sub 2-hour script.
Right.
And he was like, I mean, this is another Spielberg thing of him being like, I can get away with this movie being over 3 hours long. Don't feel the need to rush this and compress
this doesn't
it
need to
into
play
a
at
traditional
Sundance
structure.
in 2025. It doesn't have to be a tight 82 minutes.
Right.
At first he resists. They went to Poland together. They meet with survivors. I think, they talk about like, what do we put in there? Zalian initially had this sort of hard rule of like, no, Schindler has to have been in the room essentially to have a scene, take place in this movie. And Spielberg's like, no.
I think an incredibly smart decision. But Showa comes out of the same soup, which is just like this feeling, getting back to what we were saying earlier, of these people are still alive. There are people who lived through this who are still like young enough and cogent enough that we need to get all of these stories on record and do something with them and preserve them and archive them, because they're going to start disappearing.
Which is part of the reason why making something like Schindler's List is so dangerous, and I think was greeted by a lot of skepticism among certain critics, because it has the potential to malform the collective memory of the Holocaust in a way that, as we've seen based on the movie's influence, is a real power that it had to shape our understanding of it.
So the biggest thing that they have to figure out now, Spielberg talks a lot about going to Poland, transforming his relationship with his religion, understanding the Holocaust completely differently if you go there. But what they also don't really know is like, what is the motivation behind Schindler's sort of transformation? Because I feel like the survivors are basically just like, well, he did this thing for us. But it's like, but they don't know, like, why? Why did this seemingly fairly amoral businessman not suddenly maybe, but like, fairly quickly start to behave a different
gradually
way.
In steps, and it always, I think thing that makes him so interesting as a character is it feels like for the first 2/3, if not 3/4 of the movie, he is fighting against the idea of any responsibility. Where every time he does something that helps someone,
He's like, it's good business.
well, and then also is just like, never fucking make me do that again.
Oh yeah,
That's an aberration.
I think one of the reasons that this movie is a masterpiece is because it does this very controlled sense of winnowing over the course of the movie in a number of different regards, where this habitable space that the Jews of Krakow have comes smaller and smaller and smaller in very understandable ways. You feel Schindler's sort of moral compass. This is a mixed metaphor, but like getting smaller as well as the movie goes on. And there is a geometry to how he is reaching this sort of moral epiphany that is reflected in the scope of the movie. And every time I watch the movie, I'm surprised all over again by how narrow its confines are.
Yeah, I also think the huge shifts and the revelations, and part of it is, and it seems like this is just the way the accounts supported I'm backing myself into a sentence I can't construct properly here. It feels like part of what was fascinating about Schindler was there was a certain degree of inscrutability into like what caused these shifts and when and how and what was going on in his mind, and these sort of blurry lines of like, as you're saying, the moments where he's like, it's good for business and denying that there's any altruistic motives versus the moments where he does an altruistic thing and then feels angry about it. That the moments of big psychological shifts and catharsis are like in between the scenes of this movie. And even the thing that is closest to a moment in the film of him until the end, which we'll talk about, the closest to a moment of him being like, oh my God, my understanding has changed, is obviously the little girl in the red coat. But yet, in that moment, the person who's having the bigger emotional reaction is the mistress on the horse next to him. Like she's
his wife. But there's
it's the wife at that moment, not the mistress?
Yeah, there is nothing that would have cheapened, I think, this story more than acting as though Schindler's moral awakening was schematic enough to like be done like a Save the Cat like version
sort of
like him.
I'm shocked to learn that,
because the red coat happened so much earlier than I remembered, and then even then he's like going back and forth and fighting it. And when you get to like the last chunk of the film where Ben Kingsley has to pull out of him that he's purposefully making bad shell casings,
But mine worked, damn it.
and you're like, oh, a huge shift has happened here. Where not only has he saved people, but now he's like trying to undermine the war and everything. And those scenes happen in between the margins.
Right. I mean, it's because, again, with the girl in the red coat, you are seeing someone sort of awaken to this idea of the value of a single human life. He's witnessing a crime that would have been obliviated into history if not for him having eyes on it, because no one else is watching this girl. I mean,
it's a metaphor of the girl.
But it's, I think also what is so powerful about the movie, again, going back to the good and evil of it all, is that I don't think Schindler's moral awakening happens if not for his relationship with Amon Goethe, who is an evil that is so profound that he has to distance himself from it. That it's like only by virtue of being exposed to that degree of sociopathic cruelty is he able to sort of recognize his own morality and step back and find his own humanity.
Most of the other Nazis you're seeing up until that point in the film, even the ones who seem to get some degree of perverse pleasure from it, are primarily the like just following orders guys, which I don't think Spielberg views as any less evil, but the level of sadism and perversion in the Ralph Fiennes character is, you're right, it's the thing of just like, I am fundamentally a different person than this guy.
Yeah, I mean, and there's, I think the interplay between those two characters is so brilliant. There's that great scene. I mean, there are several great scenes between them, but especially when he is, talking to him, he's about to bargain for Helen Hirsch's life at the end, and he's talking, but like Goethe, even after everything that's happened and their various negotiations, cannot fathom why Schindler would want the Jews to work for him. He assumes it has to be some sort of financial trick that he's missing. And I think in Schindler's awareness of that sort of moral bankruptcy, it unlocks something in him that dealing with a slightly less, profoundly evil, but still obviously evil Nazi commandant would not have maybe precipitated the same reaction.
Well, right. The difference is the guys he has to fight with to get Kingsley off the train
I mean, okay, so that is the scene of, I think this is the most important scene in the movie in a way, because this is the scene where you're seeing one Spielberg collide with another and sort of knot themselves together in a way that I think makes this movie what it is and makes him eventually the artist he would become, which is that, it's a very suspenseful scene of him trying to rescue Itzhak Stern from being sent away to one of the camps. And he tells the guys in this like very fun movie that it's a very fun moment that owes as much to something like Casablanca and like classic 50s film, 40s and 50s films as it does to Holocaust narratives. He's telling them he's going to send them to the Eastern Russia by the end of the month. And then the cut is to Liam Neeson walking along the train saying, Stern, Stern. And then who enters the frame are the two Germans who you see have now bowed to his will and are working his bidding. And it's a completely slick cut that is it's foregrounding the entertainment in what is ostensibly the most consequential dramatic moment of the movie so far. And it's a perfect marriage between the entertainment value and like a choice that almost no other filmmaker would make to like really squeeze the fun out of that moment.
It's almost a joke.
And then
like, it's kind of a comedy edit.
It's a very funny edit. And then it pivots again in the span of a single shot to what is the most horrifying moment of the movie so far, which is when they exit frame after Liam Neeson says, if I had been here 5 minutes later, then where would I be?
It's like scolding him.
Exactly. And saying like, where would I be? I don't give a shit about you. Like, where would my business be? And the camera lingers on the luggage that's being taken from the Jews who were promised that it would go with them to the camps. And we follow that into a back room where it's unpacked and sorted and obviously, organized so that it can be sold and they're never going to see their own belongings again. And all of this is happening with a fluidity that no other filmmaker would think to approach it. And it's really, it's just so fluidly blending the Hollywood of it all with the sobriety of what the story is and the gravity of it. And I think from that moment on, he's just so in the pocket, as Griffin Newman would say.
But that's also when the movie has a mission, when it doesn't really before then. It takes half the movie,
everything
for the sort of plot to come to coalesce. Like his plot. I don't mean
you guys have seen this movie far more than I have. So correct me if I'm wrong here. I feel like up until that moment, anything that he ostensibly does to help another person is
profit motive.
No, I was going to say is facilitated by Kingsley. It's like Kingsley going this guy, and then Neeson is stamping it.
Kingsley is essentially using him as a vehicle for stuff. That's true. Right.
Which Kingsley's incredible. But
Kingsley's also playing to his desire to save money,
Right. I mean, it's part of the magic of the performance. And then, that Kingsley is quietly the one he's so fucking good, is like running the miracle.
Did you listen to Kingsley on Marin?
Oh my God, it is.
Ben Kingsley is
one of the hardest listens I've ever endured.
Look, I love Ben Kingsley. He's given like many performances that I love.
Listen to this episode, David.
I might. I mean, but like he has such a rep now for being, pretty tough. So I'm not surprised to hear that he and Marin didn't exactly vibe.
Here's what's incredible about it. He's really tough in the exact way you expect him to be. And he just like immediately clams up at Marin being way too casual and conversational about stuff. And him reading Marin is kind of glib. And then also clearly like, oh, this is one of those things where this guy wants me to like break down and like get emotional or start sharing intimate details. And that's not what Kingsley wants to do.
I think Kingsley wants to be treated with like a lot of reverence.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Right. He wants every interview to be like a career retrospective, like award, like, Lifetime Achievement Award.
You're here to tell us about, whatever.
And he talks about like the Ryan Reynolds. What was that like awful movie? He made so many awful movies in the last 10 years, but there's one with like Ryan Reynolds. And like technology, I saw it.
I know the one you're fucking talking about.
It was Ryan Reynolds in it? I don't even know.
It's not called Limitless, but it's got a title like that.
It's like Limitless. It's like along those lines.
Right.
But,
wait, what movie is this?
It's a movie where like Ryan Reynolds' consciousness is in his body or vice versa.
Yes.
It's a weird fucking thing.
The worst part of Ryan Reynolds to have in your body, one would argue. But I think that like the thing about Kingsley, he talks about that in the same sort of terms that he would talk about Gandhi or Schindler's List. And anyway, the
thing I was going to say about that interview is, as much as he is like putting up walls and being like, I'm not going to play your fucking game, and if this is what your show is like, then I'm going to give you like monosyllabic answers. By the end of the episode, even though he's doing it like with a very tight grip, he basically admits that his entire life is driven by the fact that his father never gave him an ounce of approval, and then gets him to admit that he's too critical of his sons who have also followed him into acting, and he disapproves of
Marin refuses to end any interview until someone makes the same
It's
confession.
kind of incredible.
The movie is selfless.
Thank you.
I knew it had a lesson
It's a
there.
Tarsem movie.
Right.
But like his most anonymous.
Weird.
Yeah.
You know that if you go up to Tarsem and tell him that you saw The Fall in theaters, he will give you a like huge hug, physical hug,
That's great.
on the spot.
2
Anyone.
to 3 people can
Guaranteed.
do that in life.
I saw it in theaters.
Good for you.
Here's let me finish my point I want to make here, right? So like this is the first moment in which Neeson does something not aided by Kingsley. It is provoked by Kingsley. He is saving Kingsley, but he's not just like signing off on something that guy put into motion. And Kingsley, the whole first hour of the movie, is walking on eggshells. It is this incredible unspoken performance of him just being like, how much can I get away with before I get a little too loud and a little too sloppy, and this guy like clamps down on me?
It's sort of like a reverse assimilation that he's performing, that's just like obviously deeply embedded in the Jewish experience that would follow the Holocaust in particular. But like there's that amazing scene right after the one armed worker has come to him and just to thank Schindler for employing him, which obviously
Never let that happen, never.
Right. And
Right.
but the way that Kingsley handles that scene where the driver comes out and Kingsley's like, fuck off, like go away, get in the car. Like we need to heed this off. This has to have never happened. It's a brilliant negotiation in real time.
The effort he puts into saving Kingsley, which part of the magic is he doesn't do it with a sense of stakes or immediacy in a way. He's doing his like Schindler bullshitter.
I need that guy.
Right, freaking out the two officers kind of thing. And then you think that it's like, he's not going to say anything and he's not going to show emotion, but this is an acknowledgement that he's started to care about Kingsley a little too much, or at the very least has started to see him as a person a little too much to let him get away, that there's some emotional calculation. Kingsley gets off the train in a one unbroken long Spielberg oneer, right? He gets off the train. It's like door open, train stopped abruptly. Kingsley gets off. He is playing the emotion of a guy who was 30 seconds ago convinced he was about to die.
This was it.
Even though Schindler's running after the chain, it's like, well, he's missed it by 5 seconds.
It's compounded by the understanding that Stern has a greater awareness of the consequence of being on that train than anyone else.
This guy has just to some degree accepted his fate, right? Is now like being saved by a hair, steps off the train. They close the door so quickly behind him. The train starts moving. He glances back for half a second at like, holy shit, all of those people are about to die. Just gets behind Schindler and walking, starts apologizing profusely.
Well, he's apologizing while he's still in the car. He's
Right.
like, I'm sorry.
I fucked up. I fucked up. And you're expecting that Schindler's going to be stoic. And Schindler's like, no, you're right. You did fuck up. Fuck you. Never let that happen ever again.
It's also one of so many different moments in this movie that hinge on a kind of divine providence, which, you know, there were some criticisms when the movie came out about how the Jews were seen as having, just being this faceless mob in the background and not having any agency.
Well,
but
guess who took away all of their agency?
Yeah, but it's
Nazi
also
Germany.
It's also saying that, like, you know, the flip side of that argument, which is there's this famous Village Voice symposium that came out right around the time of the movie, where someone was arguing that, you know, the Jews don't. It's makes it seem as if they didn't do anything to save their own skin, and I think that is countered just by like. Or, you know, and like only the people who survive deserve to survive. And I think it's countered by like just the role that we see Luck play in this movie time and time and time again. One person, you know, he lines up 50 people, shoots 25 by going to every other one. You know, one person hides here, one person hides there. It's all complete happenstance.
I think this movie does an incredibly good job. I want to say better than maybe any other Holocaust film I have seen, of really dramatizing the drawn out psychological warfare aspect of the dehumanization, where I feel like people who struggle to wrestle with the enormity of the Holocaust are like, I don't get it. How did they just show up one day, tell the Jews to get in cages and no one fought back, right? Like, how did they just accept this sort of victimization and not fight back against it? And the movie is showing that it's like, their strategy was so complicated, so drawn out, so gradual, that there are these constant steps of just like, we just have to like accept this thing and then find our moment to fight back against it, or to slip away, or to get our exit. And people did get away and people did survive, right? But it all felt so kind of random and chaotic that there was this gaming of even the women on the train being like, I've heard this rumor about the showers. They're like, the fuck are you talking about? That's just crazy. What you're describing is crazy. That couldn't be real.
Yeah, I mean, you feel it's, again, going back to the idea of how Spielberg, the gradients by which he introduces different elements, you feel the noose tightening as the circle where the Jews are allowed to live grows smaller, and you feel Schindler expanding in that space. And there's that great scene that could potentially have been too on the nose. I mean, this is not an overwhelmingly subtle movie, but I think, it is very effective in doing this, where we see the Jews being kicked out of their apartment in Krakow, and then who takes up the apartment is Schindler, and he says it couldn't be any better, which is kind of a ham-fisted and clunky line, but only exists so that it can be mirrored by the Jewish woman then saying, it can't get any worse. It's and you have that scene where they're talking in the ghetto about like the ghetto. One guy says the ghetto is liberty. They're talking, no one stole my business today. Nobody threw me on a truck. The constant rationalizations of like, at least I have this, at least I have that. And like frogs in boiling water. It's they had never been witness to a Holocaust before.
No, and also like you get to a point where people have just so fully lost their sense of selves. You're attacking them from so many strange, unprecedented angles and moving the goalposts so constantly, while also constantly maintaining this looming threat of severe violence, tragedy, nightmarish experience that people just like don't even know what to fucking do anymore.
People also just didn't understand how you could kill people en masse, because that's not something that they industrialized.
Something people struggle to wrap their heads around today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. One of the things that makes this movie very tough to watch.
It's also
today.
like we would also have to delve into like pre-war European, like Poland. These countries are nascent, they've been sort of like overrun by empires many times over the last 100, 200 years. This isn't a country with a sort of like completely fixed, structured government. Obviously it's been, invaded at this point by both countries, by both Russia and Germany. We can't, I need to go back to the compelling fact that, of course, Mel Gibson was one of the people considered to play Oscar Schindler.
What a world.
Along with Harrison Ford, who certainly makes sense both for Spielberg and for age, and like time. And the name you want me to name, which is Kevin Costner.
Talked about it recently.
Probably
I think Kevin Costner was kind of lobbying for it.
Yes. He also...
and as Beatty was, Warren Beatty famously was as well.
In the period where Costner, where Spielberg was reluctant to direct it, Costner also took a stab at like, I think I could direct this.
Schindler's List Part 1.
I mean, look, obviously Costner is what, 2-3 years removed from Dance with the Wolves.
Yeah.
The man is...
He's feeling confident.
What if he ran out of funding halfway through Schindler's List? Had to go to Santa Barbara.
2 to 4 or more en route. Spielberg instead goes for Liam Neeson. One wants someone who looks like the guy, in his head at least. 2, not an unknown actor at this point, but not a star, won't bring baggage to the character, won't overwhelm the film. Obviously, if Warren Beatty was playing Oscar Schindler, it probably would. Like, would he rock it? Possibly. Would he do great in all the scenes where he's fucking his way around town? Yeah. He'd be good at that.
Can we talk about Neeson for a bit?
It's an incredible performance.
It's an incredible performance, and I love when this kind of thing comes up on our show. An incredible performance, one of his most important performances, and yet when you step back, you're like,
is no question the most important performance in his career.
Complete outlier from the rest of his
neck
career.
And neck.
Well, this is like, first off, the movie starts, he starts speaking. Not immediately, right? But when his first dialogue kicks in.
The movie starts, they light the candles, and he's like, I'm here too, by the way.
It's not 100% unrecognizable.
He's doing an accent.
It is the only time I think he has successfully changed his voice to any degree.
But he still has a hint of the brogue, and it works.
He does.
This is some of the best accent work of any movie I've ever seen, and that of all these movies that immediately caused me to roll my eyes at English and various other, actors of other ethnicities.
I didn't want to do subtitles. Yeah. Subtitles, you're reading the movie, not watching it. You're not looking at what's happening.
There's something about just maybe they're just getting the tones right. Not that I am all that well versed in what the right accent should sound like beyond my own family. There are a lot of accents in this film. It all feels right. I don't know. I don't question the reality of it.
I feel like every other time Neeson tries to do an accent, he is putting a little something on top of his Irish brogue, and you just kind of accept he sounds like Liam Neeson. He's making some effort to get away from pure Irish, but he's got his own voice and no one else sounds like that.
What about when he played Qui-Gon? Hey, Sebulba, give me that kid.
This is what I'm saying. He never fully sounds American. He never fully sounds British. This is the best I think he's done at finding a voice that is different from him while also retaining some of the core like movie star qualities. It is
This
also
and Ponyo's dad.
Did he bust out his Schindler's voice for that?
He's incredible.
I mean, I think it
Name the
helps
dub.
that so much about the character that he's playing here is a performance in and of itself. It allows for a theatricality that he can play up and sort of disappear into. And there's that incredible, first sequence where he's, trivia, the maitre d' at the nightclub where you see it is Branko Lustig, who is not only the producer of the film, but a survivor of Auschwitz. And yeah, he goes in there and he's putting on a show, like one by one in this nightclub and bending everyone to his will. And the charisma is just like fucking off the screen.
He looks like he just walked out of Casablanca. He's like, got the cigarette smoke hanging over him. Like it's this is the best black and white photography. This movie is like taking a shit on the idea that like just putting a movie in black and white makes it look good. It's like, no. You can fuck it up, or you can do what Janusz did here.
This movie looks.
This movie has
the eyeshadows in that first scene alone are.
He's got an incredible face for black and white.
Yeah, of course, because it's got a brow and crags, so the shadows can fall on his face.
And the movie also feels like it starts the day after Oskar Schindler has realized that his businesses fail because he doesn't take advantage of the fact that he's hot as shit. He's finally figured out that the fact that I am like the most charismatic and beautiful man alive is going to be my greatest asset as a businessman because I am not a great businessman.
David, 2 anecdotes. David, not an ad read. I apologize for everyone who got triggered by that. Sims, if you can find either of these in the dossier, there's the like entertainment executive who Spielberg recommended Neeson study, where he was like, this is the kind of charisma I want you to have.
Ross. He was the CEO of Time Warner.
In a way where Neeson's obviously a very charismatic guy, right? And can get away with the sort of like Qui-Gon Aslan-y, just like, this is the most important man in the world speaking like the word of God.
Loved Steve Ross. Steve Ross was the head of Time Warner. I am not aware of Steve Ross actually being the greatest human alive. Spielberg seemed to think he was. I guess he was like a philanthropist, and maybe he was like, by CEO
you remind me of Oskar
Schindler
Schindler could be a loaded compliment. I don't know.
Well, but he's saying like, no. Study Steve Ross. Like we're saying, like study how he walks. Spielberg seems like very entranced by Steve Ross as a kind of like good businessman.
But I also think he's like acknowledging that this guy needs to have a certain kind of businessman charisma and not a movie star charisma.
Sure, that makes sense.
Right?
That makes sense.
I'm like, if it's Gibson, if it's Costner, if it's Beatty, you're too far on the other line of that. Neeson obviously has movie star charisma, but there's also the deep well of Irish sadness in him that is always his superpower. And also knowing that he's like not a guy who's going to be protective of his leading man image, that he's a guy who's going to view this as an acting assignment. And he's like, watch the way that people who are good at fucking winning negotiations behind closed doors have charisma, not the people who are good at like getting on camera and charming a public.
But it's like, what if Charles Foster Kane enjoyed being Charles Foster Kane?
Right.
Like that's sort of the vibe.
But that's these guys who like fucking love making deals, you know? The other anecdote I want to say, I can't remember if it's Kingsley who's the one who gave him this advice, but that he like a week or two into filming was like, I don't know if I have any handle on this thing. Spielberg is like not giving me direction. He's not explaining it to me. I feel like I'm floundering. And I think it was Kingsley who was like, you need to just trust him.
Sure. I can find that probably.
Right. You are a color on his palette. He hired you because he knows you can do what you want to do. He's going to make you look good. He's adjusting around your performance. Don't get freaked out by the lack of hand holding. But I think there is a little bit of panic in the
I'd be
lack
pretty
of
fucking
communication.
panicked if I was Liam Neeson making this movie.
I'm saying there's a little bit of panic that I think helps the performance.
Maybe, yeah, of course, because Schindler is kind of skating the whole time.
Yeah, he's got enough money to fall back on. I mean, that's the first thing he says to Stern is like, I don't have the money for the kind of business that I need you to trade enamelware with
I think
other Jews. And
part of this is Spielberg being like, I want to approach this like a documentary. I want to just let the actors do their thing and then figure out how to shoot it rather than doing like perfect dollhouse arrangements. Which to Neeson, he's like, why is no one giving me direction? I've never really been the lead of a big Hollywood movie like this before.
Darkman dead in a ditch.
I'm sorry, I forgot. That is wild.
Yeah, Darkman's before
that Darkman is so shortly before this.
It would be funny if Spielberg was like, I just loved the way he did Darkman.
I love Darkman.
Darkman died.
Well, also, let's call out. This is only the second movie for M. Beth Davids. Her first film is Army of Darkness, Sam Raimi and Universal. Is Spielberg quietly plucking the Raimi cast?
Maybe he is, but you know who it's also only the second movie for? Ralph Fiennes, Voldemort himself, which, you know, it's one of those like Spielberg things where, or like casting things where Spielberg's like, look, the man screamed evil to me. What can I tell you? Like, and Spielberg lays on so much praise of like, I really think this guy could be like Alec Guinness or Laurence Olivier. Like, you know, like he's the talent.
Which he could be Pope.
Right.
Which he kind of is. Yes.
Right. I continually...
Excuse me, he doesn't want to be the Pope. Stop voting for him.
Can I close the loop on my Neeson thought to then bridge to the Fiennes thought?
Yes. It's just the way you say these things sometimes. It's like, you know, you're building another skyscraper. I'm like, we barely talked about the movie. Carry on. Yes.
I think the lack of guidance he's giving him is because he doesn't want to feel like he's controlling the performances, and he's trying to let this movie develop more organically, which is freaking out Neeson a little bit because this is a little out of his wheelhouse. And working on Darkman, Raimi is notoriously like, here's the shot and I'm going to do this, and at 2 seconds tilt your head this degree, so
Cock your eyebrow.
hands-on.
Yes,
right? Which to
he's making a
Neeson,
cartoon.
I think does subconsciously, and I don't think this was Spielberg's intent, create a certain energy of, am I getting away with this? That helps the performance.
It's part of the negotiation that we see in the movie, because the first sequence of this movie, the first real sequence of Schindler at the nightclub, is shot like The Shadow. I mean, like it is hyper precise, and that gives way almost immediately when we cut to the footage of foot soldiers running down the street to the docudrama, like handheld.
But he is almost of like finding his way into doing that around what the actors are doing rather than collaborating them to get to that point, which I think is mostly what he had done with his movies up until this film. Whereas Ralph Fiennes feels like he just is like incredibly studious and self-sufficient and just showed up and was like, I figured it out. Here's this guy. And Spielberg was like, great, you're ready to go. Like, fuck it. I don't know how you found this. He talks about it like he had like a voodoo doll where Ralph Fiennes was like, I just like lived with this horrible creation that I like understood and poked and prodded.
Right. I mean, Fiennes talks about, he, like, people who play villains all the time, like, understood some sympathy for this, like, broken evil man or whatever. But
I love that he shows up in the ghetto with the cold from Bridge of Spies. I mean, some of the two great cold acting, I think, films.
You watch this movie now and you're like, there's Ralph Fiennes. And I joke Lord Voldemort. That's literally, like, that's why him being cast as Voldemort would, to me at the time, I was like, can we try again? Like, that's too obvious.
Yeah, except
like,
guess what? He fucking rocked the house as Lord Voldemort.
He's great as
that
Voldemort.
Performance is unbelievable.
I have to be clear, he's very good in the role.
He's one of my favorite screen actors of all time.
Next, you'll be casting Mads Mikkelsen as a villain or something crazy like that.
Imagine, that'd be crazy.
I joked the other day on text, it's going to be Danny Houston.
I swear, the Lithgow thing. I'm like, I'm in this state where I'm like, well, I shouldn't even care about this stupid Harry Potter TV show. We need less replications of these books over and over again. Like, there's plenty done already, and we don't need to be feeding that beast.
I feel a relief that we're
like,
not
John
going to
Lithgow as Dumbledore, and I'm like, fuck that.
God damn it. But also, I feel the relief that it's like, thank God we're not tying down Mark Rylance for a decade, which was the rumor.
Yeah.
Ralph Fiennes.
Imagine seeing this film in 1993. 99.9% of people do not know who Ralph. No, 100%. Nobody knows who fucking Ralph Fiennes
100%.
is, unless you've been going to the National Theater in Britain or whatever. Right. And like, this guy shows up, and I do feel like people were just like, they got a Nazi from like the 40s.
Right.
They just found one like in a time tunnel. Like, that's what it feels like when you're watching him, those first scenes.
I find talking to people, very often people just assume he won for this. I will hear people constantly refer to Academy Award winner Ralph Fiennes and be like, he won for Schindler, right? And then he has that immediate, like, it's very similar to the Edward Norton arc, which is like, out of nowhere, who the fuck is this supporting performance? Then like immediate elevation of leading man.
I don't know if he should have won. I wrestle with it to this. I wrestle with it.
It doesn't matter who else is in that category. He should have won. But I also completely understand.
Who beat him? Who? Tommy Lee Jones for The Fugitive, which is basically the greatest supporting performance.
It's a great performance, but there is no performance in this movie that should not have won an Oscar. But
wait a second. Then Ben Kingsley's losing Ralph Fiennes. You've defeated yourself.
No, they should have both won. Split the trophy, or he could have pulled a Ving Rhames. One of them could have won and given it to the other.
I watched that again the other day. It's a really good moment.
But
it's like your favorite moment, because that was bad for you as a kid, because you were like, "This is allowed? Like, we can just do this."
when Michael Caine won the Oscar for Cider House Rules, I was like,
"Said this on our show, right?
Sit back.
He's gonna do it.
He's gonna do the right thing.
Joel.
He's going to give it to Haley.
The torso.
I was so sure he was going to do it. I was like, it's not over yet.
I'm always like, it's crazy Fiennes didn't win. Right, Tommy Lee Jones. Nobody has delivered a line better in a movie ever than Tommy Lee Jones in The Fugitive. I'm not joking. I'm deadly serious.
I don't care.
I don't care is the greatest line reading in the history of movies. Prove me wrong. At me, David L. Sims on Twitter, which I don't use anymore.
Which you will never be reading.
You could just send the replies into the void.
I do think...
And plus, he was Tommy Lee Jones. It was like, hey, man, you've been in this industry for 20 years. You're a legend. Like, it's time for you to win your Oscar. Ralph Fiennes, I think it's partly like, well, he's young. He'll be back. Maybe in a conclave. 2, it's like, maybe he's just a fucking crazy person they found for this role who's so incredible, and maybe it's like some magic trick.
No, he had to do the English Patient to be like, I actually am that hot and not a Nazi.
This is what's nuts to me, is like within 3 years, it's like, oh, now you were like matinee idol in a huge sweeping epic that like ran the fucking gauntlet at the Oscars and was a hit.
Yeah, but he had to lose to Shiny McShine.
And then they don't nominate him again for 30 fucking years.
Obviously, I think they should have nominated him for Grand Budapest.
Correct. He should have
won.
Should have won. But there was, at the time, category confusion. In my opinion, stupidly. Are there other Ralph Fiennes movies, though, that he should have gotten an Oscar nomination for? I love A Bigger Splash, and he's on my ballot that year, but obviously that wasn't a big splash with voters.
I feel like there was the Duchess Reader in Bruges year where people were like,
he's so good
kind of should get a supporting, but no one could figure out which movie to put him in for.
The answer is In Bruges, but that movie kind of broke late and obviously is the silliest.
And David Cronenberg's Spider?
He's amazing at Spider.
What about...
That is an incredible performance.
It sure is.
I would have given
That's
him...
mostly mumbling.
What about...
I'd give him a supporting actor nom for fucking Goblet of Fire, a movie that I think is otherwise trash.
Wait. Goblet of Fire?
Because that's the first one he's introduced in, right?
He's in it for like 5 minutes. That's the one?
That's the whole final set piece.
You know what
I'm aware that it's the whole final set.
He is great in a movie that I think has its fair share of flaws as The Constant Gardener.
He's very good in that movie.
Which Rachel Weisz wins an Oscar.
Right, the Oscars just seem to make one rule where they were like, it gets one win and nothing else.
I think that's enough for The Constant Gardener, but still.
It's crazy how quickly he becomes
not
a take
constant enough.
He becomes a take it for granted guy.
No, Griff. I disagree with you. That's not true.
Okay.
You're wrong.
Make your counter-argument.
The whole thing with him is he makes Schindler's List.
Yeah.
This is a star-making moment.
Who the fuck
of course,
is this
you've
guy?
played a villain, a Nazi, the most scary Nazi.
I will say, I do think it is also a case of he doesn't win because the character is almost too evil.
I think that's part of it.
Like, it is so upsetting that people are like, we have to nominate it, but it feels gross to give him
unless you're going full clown mode, Christoph Waltz, they do not want
It's why Fassbender didn't win.
They don't want to reward people for finding
It's why DiCaprio didn't get nominated for Django.
Well, that's a bit of a over-the-top performance, too, in my opinion.
But
I don't know if you guys noticed this, but he's kind of like dialing it up slightly in that movie. So next year, he makes Quiz Show, which he's wonderful.
Oh my God. So good in Quiz Show.
But that's a movie where clearly the Oscars liked that movie, got Best Picture nomination, did not know what to do. Because that movie's filled with good performances. Totoro, weirdly, doesn't get a nomination.
Right, gets the precursor nominations, and then Armin Mueller-Stahl gets the surprise. I'm sorry, I always make this fucking mistake between Shine and Quiz Show.
And Paul Scofield is awesome in Quiz Show, but it's kind of like a old legend giving a couple great scenes. So he misses out on Quiz Show. Also, in Quiz Show, he's kind of playing a dweeb.
Guess what?
He's so good in it.
Rolls in Quiz Show.
Okay, the next year, this is his career so far. These are the only 2 movies he's made so far since, Strange Days. Amazing performance. Quite a curveball from him.
And people are like, who is this guy?
I need my mini discs. Like, we're like, this is Ralph Fiennes? Okay. The next year after that, English Patient. Holy shit. Here he is as a romantic lead. He's taken a bath with KST.
Is that movie good? Should
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Yeah,
it's very
sweeping. It's why they invented the word sweeping.
It's sweeping as hell.
But here's like romantic Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah, he's hot in it.
He's such a handsome guy.
And he's really good. He loses to Shiny McShine. If he hadn't lost to him, he possibly would have lost to Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire, the greatest performance ever. But he's really good in it. Okay, so the next year he does Oscar and Lucinda. Not a bad movie, young Cate Blanchett, but that doesn't really
He gets into some failed Oscar bait stuff. Sunshine in 99.
This is what I'm trying to tell you. He kind of goes down a bit of a tricky road.
Sunshine kind of fucks, though.
Well, the next year he does The Avengers. Oh, The Avengers, that movie made $1 billion. No. No, the other one.
Right.
Hold on.
There's a sort of like, okay, this guy doesn't cross over. He's a prestige
The Avengers
guy.
where it's like 89 minutes, but like the closing credits are like 20 minutes long.
That one only made $500 million, right?
Yeah. Of course, the voice of Ramses in Prince of Egypt does a great job. 1999, right. You have the sort of Sunshine, Unjin, the Russian novel adaptation, End of the Affair, where you're like, has he become history's greatest homework actor? Right,
Yeah.
where it's like the man does movies based on books you read in school.
But here's
He
another thing
needed
that's starting
Terrence
to happen.
Davies to cast him in
yes,
something.
I
around
think
that
he's
time.
great in The End of the Affair, which is kind of a
But
forgotten
I was
movie.
going to say, it's the kind of thing where it's similar to Rachel Weisz. It's like, oh, and look, the actress gets the nomination. Like, you're taking Fiennes for granted, being like, oh, this is that thing he does.
Okay, so he literally takes 3 years off. Doesn't make a movie. I'm having fun with Fiennes' career now because it's really interesting.
We're having a Fiennes time.
In 2002, Spider, an amazing movie, but small.
Sure.
Obviously.
Challenging.
The Good Thief, uncredited. Okay, that doesn't count. That's a Neil Jordan movie.
That's a remake. No.
It's a remake of Bob Le Flambard.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. It's Nolte, very, very normal voice in it and everything.
I am a Flambard.
Truly, that's the movie. I saw it in theaters.
Let me flambe.
Red Dragon, lazy casting in a way, but he's not bad.
Do you see?
As Dollarhide.
Do you see?
Do you see? And his most unnerving and strange performance, maybe in his entire career, Made in Manhattan, where you're like, why is Jennifer Lopez in love with this vampire?
This Republican vampire.
Like, that movie is unhinged simply because of him. Everything else in that movie, you're like, I get it. She's a maid in Manhattan. She takes the train. She's got a kid. She's falling in love with a rich guy.
Oh, no, it's spelled maid. Yeah.
No, it's spelled. But like, that's where it's like, well, hey, could Ray Fiennes do this? And everyone's like, not really.
But it was a hit.
Yeah, it made money. But like, again, does
Never
anyone
tried to
walk
do that
away
again.
from that being like, you know who I loved in that?
Yes.
And then, another 3 years off. In 2005, he's in a zillion things. He's in Harry Potter. He's in The White Countess, which is a late Merchant Ivory movie that doesn't really play. He's in Constant Gardener, which is good. He's in The Chum Scrubber. Remember that?
Go Fish.
And then he's kind of, because of Voldemort, become supporting villain guy in Bruges. The Reader is a supporting role, very heavily. Hurt Locker rocks in it. Swings in like a wrecking ball.
The Reader?
He plays
not another Nazi.
He plays old.
Have you seen The Reader?
Young man?
Not since theaters.
He plays.
Once was enough.
He's the older version.
He's the grown-up version of.
Have you seen The Reader more than once?
No.
In your life? Has anyone?
No, but not even.
It is hard to imagine rewatching The Reader.
I don't think Daldry watched it more than once beginning to end.
No,
he is the grown-up version of the kid who has to testify that she read the book to him, or he read the book to her, whatever. What was I going to say?
Just interesting.
It's all building, obviously, to the apex of his career.
Grand Budapest?
No, I was going to say the reteam of him and Neeson in the Titans films.
Of course, he played Hades.
Hades and Zeus.
One of the greatest taglines of our time for Clash of the Titans. Titans will clash.
He never got bad. But at all.
No,
but
you're
it's
right.
Crazy
it is a
how
weird career.
When Skyfall comes around, they're like, yeah, you can play M, James Bond's boss. And it's like, he's like not that much older than Daniel Craig. And it's like, no, Rafe, hey, you're M now. You don't get to run around.
There is perhaps a weird lack of strategy to his career that I respect now, stepping back and looking at and knowing that he's got a lot left to do.
In the 90s, the strategy kind of seems to be like, prestige movies, right? And then it starts to get more diffuse. Obviously, he done
Strange
tons of
Days is a
theaters.
weird swing. Avengers is a weird swing. Made in Manhattan's a weird swing.
You guys,
anytime he went studio, it was an odd choice.
you guys are forgetting his most unnerving performance, though, which was, of course, the videotaped introduction he sent in to the Toronto premiere of his recent film version of The Odyssey.
The
which
Return, another movie that as I went straight to homework,
which unfortunately must not exist on. I mean, Christopher Nolan kind of announced. I think he waited right until after that movie at theaters, but he did a video from a hotel room somewhere in Europe where his eyeball was against the camera.
He was
and
probably
he
in the Bone Temple where he currently is.
God, it was
with
horrifying.
our friend Nia DaCosta.
I love him so much.
I love him too.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
And
no, I'm glad we took the time to outline this because it does make more sense.
It's a weird career.
It is a weird career.
The Grand Budapest Snub is outrageous. That movie is the best movie ever made. I recently watched it and I was just like, I should watch this once a week.
I think he and Neeson are the same in that the career is so diffuse and so spread out and has so many weird eras to it that sometimes you're like, who is this guy again? If you were to sort of Hall of Fame project, just be like, pick the 10 most representative projects and try to hit the different phases or modes of their career. If you reduce either of those guys to just 10 movies, you're like, that's insane, right? And they still got gas in the tank and are going to keep making stuff. but they're both sort of.
Fiennes has a lot more range than
I agree
Neeson
with you.
ever has. Although
100%.
And Hollywood really sees Neeson as like one of two things, right? Like either the sort of stern
especially
villain
now.
or the
But
exactly.
Neeson is, to his credit, a much bigger New York Rangers fan than Ray Fiennes is.
How do you know?
Because
have you asked?
I haven't asked Ray Fiennes.
Do
but
you see?
I have
It's,
also
Ray Fiennes pointing to the Stanley Cup.
Oh God, it's so far in the distance now. But I have not seen Ray Fiennes at every hockey game I have ever gone to, unlike Liam Neeson.
God bless him.
And I'm just like looking over there as I watch the Rangers, like Panarin skate the puck up the ice, and there's Oscar Schindler on the sidelines, being like, "Yeah,
Carousing with ladies. Does he have a bunch of ladies with him?
He's there with Margot Robbie, another classic Rangers fan.
Good for that all. Janusz Kaminski, of course, famously, Spielberg calls up, Zygmunt, Cundy, Alan Davio, Douglas Slocum, and is like, no, thank you, no, thank you, no. He watches a film on TV called Wildflower, a TV movie, thinks it's beautifully photographed, and is like, who shot this? And Janusz says, like, Stephen watches a lot of television. Wildflower was directed by Diane Keaton on Lifetime. Crazy to imagine Spielberg being like flipping over to Lifetime, but maybe he was like, hey, Diane made a TV movie, I'll watch it. And he got offered an Amblin produced TV movie called Class of 61. And I guess, Spielberg at this point learns that he's Polish and is kind of like, well, I'm making this movie in Poland, and starts to look at it more seriously. It's still crazy though, because I do feel like Spielberg mostly worked with really established names as his DPs.
Yes, and
Janusz is basically a nobody.
Had his regular guys, but also until this point isn't married to one DP.
But the other thing is with this movie, he's basically do what you want. He's not hey, this is exactly what I need to do, and I have storyboarded this. He's kind of you should take whatever approach you need. We're not going to do dollies. We're not going to do steady
but
cams.
This is all part of him being I need to throw myself out of my comfort zone a little.
It's also part of him being inspired by Andrzej Wajda, whose name I just butchered even for my Polish background, who he was looking at as the guy in his mind's eye who he needed to be to make this movie and was never going to be. And thinking about the cinematography in those films and looking for someone who had an understanding of how a Polish crew would work and what shooting in Poland would look like, and could approximate that aesthetic. And that's exactly what he liked about Kaminski.
All of that does make sense. It is fascinating, though, that it's just it's this late at the inflection point of his career that he finds the second most important collaborator of his entire life.
Absolutely. Janusz is the king, to be clear, is a god.
It's the first E.T.
Yeah, E.T., that crazy motherfucker, who is a runner on this one. He was the best boy.
It's a slow runner. It's gotta get someone else.
I love this from Janusz. I know why JJ put this in, because he knew I would like it. The problem with doing black and white is there's silver, obviously, in the emulsion, as we all know, because we've all seen Inglourious Bastards. And that creates a negative discharge of electricity. So it makes these little spots on the film. So you have to avoid static being in the room. And so you would spray the room before you shoot, because there's all this static electricity, and weather is a problem, weird production is a problem for all of this. So that was the biggest challenge for shooting in black and white.
And this movie almost fell apart because of Spielberg's insistence of shooting it in black and white, because he wanted to, in his quote is that the Holocaust was life without light. And he wanted to reflect that in shooting without color, which he saw as sort of symbolic of light. But the movie almost didn't go because Universal was so stubborn about the idea that black and white movies don't make money.
There's also a thing, and this is an axiom that is still held to this day, that black and white films do even worse overseas, even worse on home video and television. And so almost all cases where a Hollywood studio has made a black and white film the last 35, 40 years, they insist that they shoot it in color and convert it later so that there is a color version of the film that they can at least play on foreign television. Where I know Nebraska did that, where they were on the Epix channel playing the color version of Nebraska.
And every American was glued to their television for the premiere of the color version on Epix. I remember that well.
Right. There's shit like that. And Spielberg was just I refuse. I'm shooting this in black and white.
But it's also a case of perpetuating the cinematic memory of an event, because another one of the reasons why he wanted to shoot in black and white is because every Holocaust film he had seen was shot in black and white. And the footage from the Holocaust, the archival footage, was shot in black and white. And he was continuing that idea, which is a fraught concept in and of itself. But he was trying to make sort of the ultimate version of the Holocaust films that he had seen.
Interesting. Schindler's List. What do we want to say
funny.
about it?
It's funny. I was just looking at my little notes on my phone, and I was just it's like the thing I see is it's funny. It's like, again, we talk so much about him trying to find the right tone, negotiating these different energies, and you see that come to a head with the scene where they're hiring secretaries, which is a great comic little sequence.
It's like the classic, like, Steve, you can't make this not fun. Right? Yeah, exactly.
He has to do it, and it's an inherently funny idea that Schindler was only interested in having a hot secretary, and then this woman comes in who is not a young hottie, and she can type 3 times as fast as anyone. He's like, motherfucker, like, I'm gonna have to hire her.
Well, like, what is one of the moments that changes Schindler the most as a character? It is the reaction he gets to kissing the Jewish woman delivering the cake with the daughter.
Right. Which is to Schindler just like, what? I'm a horny devil who kisses everything he sees.
Right. It almost is the thing that makes him understand the severity of the situation in a personal way for the first time is, I love kissing women. You're telling me that some women are unkissable?
By law.
Well, yeah.
But it also shows that he fundamentally doesn't think of them with the same level of disdain that like the pure Nazis do, right?
No, not at all.
As much as he's like, I refuse to care.
He doesn't think
I'm
about
a
them at all.
businessman.
It's
Exactly.
more of a Don Draper thing. But and like Don Draper, I guess, was also, admitting in that statement that he's obsessed with them. But
another Spielberg comedy edit moment is if I'm going to stay here, you have to promise me that no one will ever mistake me for anyone but Mrs. Schindler. And then hard cut to her waving goodbye on the train.
It's a really funny cut. But I'd say the other moment that is a real awakening for him, in addition to the one we talked to, is when somebody calls him a good man. I really feel like nobody, you have the one-armed worker come in, and you have, much later in the film, you have the daughter of the married couple who he reluctantly pulls out of the camp. But you get the sense that nobody has ever called him a good man before, and that was something he wasn't necessarily looking for. And he tries it out, like it's a weird fit for him. But
it almost feels like he's rejecting the responsibility, where it's like, if I crack the door open to people thinking I can help them or save them, then suddenly the obligation is going to become so great on me, a thing I cannot handle, which is what makes the end sort of like implosion so emotionally devastating, of him doing the math of like, I didn't save enough. And here's a guy who spent the entire movie being like, don't make me do anything.
Yeah, because he talks so often about how the Holocaust and World War II on the whole is just bigger than he is. He's like, okay, so they're going to kill everyone. They're going to kill everyone. Like, what does that have to do with me? What can I do about that?
Which is part of how the Holocaust
happens. He completely abstains from any sort of moral obligation.
So extreme that it is abstract. It is hard for people to get their heads around, regardless of what side they're on.
Isn't it also self-preservation? Because he doesn't really know exactly the terms or the rules of how this is all working. Like, he doesn't want to be perceived by the Nazis to be supportive.
To be clear, he is a Nazi. Oskar Schindler was a Nazi party member, and he is very much in like the German, high class, the head. Years prior, been like, we're signing up. Like, even if I'm not a true believer or whatever, like, I will happily join the party now that they run the country, right? Like, there are some people who didn't join the party, right? And like,
Fritz Lang.
There you go. Like, and like, still existed in, but like, where I'm not, he joined the party. Like, he was probably not a, deeply idealistic person, clearly, but he was a Nazi.
Yeah, I think he joined the party out of convenience because you couldn't do business if you weren't a member of the Nazi party.
Which is what all these fucking Germans did.
Yeah, I mean,
and I don't like them.
And it's too bad there's no historical parallel for that, or else we might have something on our hands here.
But that's the thing that keeps happening in the movie is, I feel like Ralph Fiennes has the line later where he's like, "We're going to be making so much money we won't care," right? That like, much like certain present day situations, there are people who are just like, if you're saying it's going to help the economy this much, that I will personally benefit this much, then maybe I like sort of blindly sign off on whatever this other stuff you're doing on the side is. Whereas other people were signing up explicitly in support of that stuff on the side.
But I think to Ben's point, it's true that he did not, and so many people would claim not to know where this was going. I think that was the Nazis' greatest advantage.
We're turning such a blind eye to like what's happening over there. Part of what's going on with Schindler is he's actually in Poland. He's German, but because of his industry and all that, he's coming to Krakow. He's seeing what's going on, where it's like a little harder to ignore. Whereas in Germany, a lot of Jews had already left. All the Jews had already.
And there was
left,
also,
been purged,
he's like Hamilton talking about like how he was been waiting for a war his whole life to rise up. I mean, like, I know you guys, there was a play called Hamilton. You may
scratching my chin at this one.
No, because I mean, there's literally a line in the movie where he talks about how the one thing that he's always been missing, in addition to realizing that he's hot as hell and needs to work that angle, is a war to cause economic instability that he can use to his advantage.
He wants to. Right.
And, I'm not likening Oscar Schindler to Hamilton in any other respect, but there is that idea of these circumstances being uniquely profitable for him and taking advantage of that. And I think the speed at which Poland falls to the Germans, it happens in a span of 2 weeks, is hugely to Schindler's advantage because everything is so up in the air, he can capitalize.
This is a guy who loves to find an angle he can work. The scene where he meets Kingsley and Kingsley's like, so wait, what do you do? And he's like, I'm not good at working. I'm not good at running things. I'm good at just being like, all of you should do this and then give me all the money, right? And it's
that's capitalism.
It's part of what he's voted for.
Again, really funny that Spielberg was like, my idol, the guy who runs Time Warner. You're right. Like,
it is very funny because like the moral arc of this movie is completely contrary to
merger and acquisition,
to capitalism. It's all about
what he did that was so good is gave up on capitalism and was like, I will just spend to zero.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it's not like he's the world's smartest businessman. It's just that he recognizes, oh, there is a uniquely bad set of circumstances here that I could maybe benefit from. And part of it is that he's like, other people don't want to touch the Jews. I view them as a cheap labor force. I can take advantage of that.
Yes, it's right. They're a product to him, and they're a balance book, equation to him.
Yeah, and as you said, he's annoyed by any reminder of their humanity because it's morally inconvenient to him. He's like, I don't want to think about this.
Also, not obviously
viewing them as vermin,
right? He's
in the
not
same way
bigoted
as
in
some
the
of his
way
party members.
that many Nazis are,
right.
And like then when Eamon arrives. You're like, right, this is a psychopath who's been enabled by this.
But don't you think
whereas,
part
of course,
that,
like there are other Nazis, high-ranking Nazis who, after the war, were put on trial and they were like, I don't know, I did what I was told. I mean, I'm the millionth person to point this out.
But don't you think part of it,
in
how Schindler's characterized in the movie, is that he's just the kind of like, look, I don't let any attachment or relationship get in the way of smart business decisions, right? Like him not viewing the Jewish people with disdain.
I don't invest in any enamel factory that I can't drop in 30 seconds or less.
He keeps his hot ass wife at arm's length. Like he keeps everyone at arm's length. He's just like, these are just numbers.
Should we shout out Caroline Goodall, fourth build in this movie? And obviously she's in Hook.
I will
she's
say,
an English rose. Very beautiful.
I think it is the best thing about Hook as a movie. Is that it at least led to her getting cast in this film.
Sure. Okay. I mean, she's good. I mean, I would say
the point about how little I like about Hook.
Right. I was going to say.
That's what I was getting at.
But yeah. She's good in this, but it's not a huge role. Just interesting that the way that works, right? Where it's like, what's that actress famous for? Well, Spielberg really liked her for a minute there.
But what's amazing about this movie is that, it is one of the great ensembles, truly like one of the true ensembles ever put together, in that there are so many fucking faces in this movie. And every one of those faces has its own story to tell that becomes absolutely, critical to the mega narrative that's happening around them. And you track these characters without even knowing it the first or second time you watch the movie.
And the movie, I think, does such an incredible job not making it, like, not holding your hand about that. Like, maybe you don't clock like, oh, this is the person I saw 15 minutes, like maybe it doesn't matter. You're always involved. And then as you rewatch the movie, you realize like, oh, I see, You
like very ambiently recognize that, oh, okay, this guy is here. And now I see him in this one shot walking out of the ghetto. And then it turns out to be the guy who, Goethe's gun misfires on when he shoots him outside of the hinge factory.
She's the biggest example of it, but it is so skillful the way he uses the Embeth Davidtz character, where, especially in the latter half, where she's on the train, the wrong train, or the train going the wrong way and whatever. And now, like, you could see most filmmakers saying to themselves, the reason I've set up this character is now I have a POV character who the audience is invested in, who we can show these terrors through. And she remains in the frame for most of those 15 minutes or so, and yet she is not the focus, where she is constantly sort of around. Sometimes she's going out of focus, sometimes she's moving out of the frame in moments like the fear of the shower and things like that. where what he's trying to do is remind you, like, yes, this is a character you have pinned in your mind, who of course you're going to keep track of, but also she's not more important than any of them. Part of the mass, like, sort of terror of what's going on here is that everyone in this space is her.
The characters that shoulder the greatest burden in that sense are the children. It's the two kids, the boy and the girl with the glasses, who we see in so many different stages, in so many different places, and have such. I mean, the moment where the little kid is blowing his whistle to alert the Nazis during the liquidation of the ghetto to her mother, and then he stops himself when he recognizes her and she him, and he hides her, and you can't tell if he's like being extra sinister in that moment or good. And then we see him. I mean, like these things all track so viscerally because they're children and because they're so instantly recognizable. And also a factoid that I only learned yesterday that will be mind-blowing for exactly 3 people out there is that one of the most memorable scenes in this movie for me is the one where Amon kills the Jewish engineer after she's building his house. We can't be arguing with these people. She is like, her performance 15 seconds of this movie.
People, his accent is so
it's
specific.
Amazing. She is played by Elena Lowensohn, who plays the clairvoyant in The Beast. That came out last this film.
Yeah. An actress with a bajillion credits.
I mean, these people are so tied to this movie in my mind that the idea that they exist in other realities is very alien.
A little bit.
To paraphrase an
Again,
Ehrlich
Ralph
tweet,
Fiennes, I think, is undone by that a little bit.
To paraphrase an Ehrlich tweet that I think about a lot. In the year of Spotlight, you had a tweet to the effect of, there are like 10 actors with 5 minutes of screen time in Spotlight who give the best supporting performance I've ever seen in a movie. You were sort of like, you could, like, beyond the argument of like, oh, who do you put in supporting actor of the Spotlight cast? You were like, basically every like survivor they interview for 5 minutes
all of the victims
is giving the most indelible, where the fuck did they find this guy performance? And some of them are actors who were just unknown and then have gotten bigger, like Michael Cyril Crichton. Some of them are like kind of like the guy who's like the former boxer, like some of them are like non-professional actors. And this is another movie like that, where anyone who shows up for like 15 seconds
I've remembered
really
these people my entire adult life.
Impactful and searing.
Because they were on screen for 45 seconds in this movie.
What is the energy being captured here? Yeah.
It's a remarkable testament to casting directors and also
this
just
movie
like
has like 6 credited casting
because
directors
there was like
end.
the Polish casting as well, right? All that. I want to shout out The Blood, because I feel like Spielberg had done lots of violence in movies before, but it's always more cartoonish. Or in like the case of The Color Purple or whatever, it's realistic-ish, but
also a little bit avoided.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I feel like he does such a good job to make like when people get shot, like blood spurts out of their head and it's gross and it's like disturbing. And
but
like,
also is now this jet black, like goo.
It looks like very like visceral and real in a way that like kind of gets me every time.
There's something kind of you're not dealing with Rambo squibs. There's something about watching in the deep background of a shot, a person just get like gunned in the head, and then you see the splurt and they fall to the ground, the blood continues to trickle, and it's like, oh, the commonality of this violence.
There's the banality of evil.
Banality is the word I was trying to avoid, but it is
a banality to just the executions. There's just like, and the movie always has less executions and murders than I remember. I think often I conflated
all of those scenes are so
but I think like The Pianist, I feel like in my mind in the first hour, it's like every time you turn the camera, you're seeing someone.
The Pianist is the same if you rewatch it.
Is it?
Where you're like, no, I've actually just kind of been thinking of like 3 or 4 moments that are so shocking and distressing.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Obviously the horror is meant to be sort of muffled and muted in the background and sort of interpolated into daily life. But they do a good job of not making you numb to it.
The Pianist, which I think is a very good film, is also about from the perspective of someone who this is happening to. And
which a lot of the Holocaust movies are.
You're watching the Warsaw Ghetto shrink around him, and then he gets shipped to Treblinka and all that.
Especially the post-Schindler movies are primarily these stories of the people trying to survive.
What are you thinking of? Of course, Life is Beautiful.
Life is Beautiful.
Of course, Jacob the
I was
Liar.
going to say bullshit like Jacob the Liar.
But wait, what are other? I'm trying to think of like other canonical sort of Holocaust films.
Like concentration camp movies.
Did they? I mean, maybe you guys weren't old enough,
doesn't even
but they
have to.
took me at school. They like got us all on buses and took us to see Life is Beautiful when it
It
opened
makes
in
sense to
theaters.
me that like
They're
it
like,
what
this is
became
important.
a sort of like, is this important?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
They weirdly didn't do that, but did take us to Shakespeare in Love, I want to say.
Well, hey man, they
Very
wanted you to have a
educational.
great time.
I just remember being like, I
These
can't believe I'm
are
getting to see
boobies.
boobs during a
Yeah.
school day.
Hell yeah. Well, that's St. Anne's for you.
Well, hey, I was not there yet.
Okay, fair enough. That's wherever you were for you.
Yeah.
This is Joseph Fiennes. He'll be our nation's most important actor.
It's
of
interesting
15
how
He's gonna
in the
stick around.
2000s, yes, there are plenty of films that, involve either directly or glancingly the Holocaust. There's movies like The Gray Zone, Tim Blake Nelson's movie, which never went anywhere, which is
I mean, it's
pretty
horrifying.
disturbing. Yes. Other films like, Costa Gavras' Amen. But like none of these movies really hit. And was there
There's
sort
not
of
a lot of
feeling
money in
like,
the Holocaust, despite what
Right.
Schindler's List may have
so,
convinced
like the
people.
closest you have is the Pianist, which is a genuinely big movie, but is made European and all. And The Reader, which nobody actually like. I guess it made like 100 million worldwide, which is insane to consider.
But there was a wild proliferation of Holocaust movies.
There's a lot of Holocaust movies, but they're not resonating
But
in the
this
culture
is a
in
part
the
of the
same way. It
saddled
kind of
reputation is
becomes
that
like, oh, it's this
retroactively-
homework, right? Yeah,
And also kind of like failed Oscar bait. Like movie that
yeah, and right. Is it some easy path to an Oscar? It
Right.
becomes cynical.
even just
In a
things
way.
like Defiance, right? Which I know is not quite the same thing, but where you just be like, oh, here's a serious director announces a movie with 3 serious actors that's about the Holocaust in some way.
Defiance is kind of a movie people were asking for. With like, well, show me a movie
I
about
want to see
Jews
Schindler's List
resisting
directed by Edward
the
Zwick.
Nazis, and it's like, well, that's a story of that, and everyone was like, well, it's okay,
Yeah.
like
But
they
there was
weren't that into it.
there was a lot of concern at the time of Schindler's List's release that because of the shadow that Spielberg cast, it would be treated as the last word on the Holocaust. And I think you see that in a lot of the hesitation around academics around the time it came out. And I think the opposite. Well, maybe not again, it's complicated because the movie is so seared into our visual memory, but it opened the floodgates in a way.
You had to get to The Zookeeper's Wife, where it's suddenly like, okay, but tell me about the zoos at the time.
I mean, Boy with the Striped Pajamas, which
Yeah,
Ehrlich has
I-
already referenced as a movie I find basically abhorrent.
It's quite abhorrent. I mean, I would say the sort of major Holocaust films post Schindler's List that had a big impact on the culture are Life is Beautiful to some extent. Although somewhat of a forgotten movie now in a weird kind of
but
way.
at the time was
At the time, very
humongous.
big. The Pianist for sure. The Reader, sort of. Son of Saul for sure. And obviously Son of Saul is trying to take a different approach into telling that story. And it was a very polarizing movie, I feel like. Some people were so moved by it. Others were were kind of not into it at all. Zookeeper's Wife, absolutely. Jojo Rabbit, that doesn't count. It's not even really a
Our
Holocaust.
buddy Chris Weitz, who made Operation Finale.
And Zone of Interest. Operation Finale, I think, is a really good movie. That's not really directly a Holocaust
this is what I'm
movie, of
saying.
course.
When we
Yeah.
had him on the podcast
Yes.
talking about Allied,
Yes.
Zemeckis' secret masterpiece.
Zemeckis' Secret, pretty good.
This is Secret 3 out of 5, yeah.
But he was saying, like, I feel like I didn't get the memo that no one liked World War II movies anymore. That he felt like this is one of those sturdy, like, Hollywood genres from the 90s on, where this is like a proven area where you can make a serious grown-up movie with movie stars and legitimate production values. And then the movie kind of got like...
Monuments Men.
Right. But
What happened to those
I
monuments?
would put forward, does something kind of shift in Inglourious Bastards?
a little bit, but
Right? With like the having such a wildly different like genre-based tone and the revisionist history and everything, where from like that moment on, people don't want to watch Hollywood make a serious version of
But
this.
then they did, the Zone of Interest did break through. I feel like it's like Son of Saul, Zone of Interest. Like if you are going to mess with the
I'm saying
form-
Hollywood.
Yeah, I
This
know,
is my
I know,
point. Both
sure.
of those movies are doing unconventional things with the form. They're happening in foreign countries with like smaller budgets. I think you can't do the big shiny studio version of it anymore.
No, but you also can't get to the Zone of Interest without Schindler's List. I think that,
I agree.
Schindler's List is a film that, its detractors may
Can
disagree,
you
but
please
it's
put the stuffed doll down? It's crazy to
I
look
love
at
it.
you making these points while you have it. No, it's fine.
I've been
You keep it,
clutching
you
it
keep
to my chest.
It
this
didn't
entire
totally
time.
connect, but I would put a Hidden Life in a similar vein to
But I think that, obviously, This is the ultimate question at the root of any conversation about Holocaust cinema is how to depict an atrocity, to what extent you are minimizing it through recreation, by visualizing it. Schindler's List takes it to one sort of maximalist extreme, but it's into my mind, and one of the reasons I have such reverence for this movie is that it's in a very real and nuanced conversation with the right to do that. And The Zone of Interest is, I think, similarly nuanced, but obviously on the opposite end of the spectrum, where it is taking away any sort of visual evidence and operating solely through absence. And I think it's not one or the other. I mean, these things have to be in conversation with each other, and I think they're both valuable in their own terms. But I also think, for me, one of the reasons why Schindler's List is bigger than the sum of its parts or its role as a movie is because, there is a danger, as I've said, about one thing becoming the focal point for our memory of the Holocaust. But I think the work that it did to enshrine the memory of the Holocaust in the abstract, even only one version of it, one telling of it, in the collective unconscious is inestimably important. And it seeded the path for all these other conversations. And you see now how even now, the Holocaust is in jeopardy of it's questioned all the time. We see Nazism on the rise and whatnot. I think it's my mind's eye. All the stories my grandfather would tell did not coalesce into something I could picture until I saw this movie. 100%. I had seen other Holocaust movies.
Yeah, and I do think Night and Fog, which you mentioned before, that's something where it's like, watch that.
Right.
There, you'll see, right. But like
again,
really
that's through absence. I mean, you're seeing just the hair piles and the shoes, and that is more in conversation with the Zone of Interest. But I think that I needed and I think a lot of people who are thinking about the Holocaust less than the descendants of survivors needed a baseline understanding of what this is. They need to see it through the lens of Hollywood spectacle in order to wrap their minds around it, to let their imagination sort of touch the horror that was sort of always a little bit beyond the pale.
As you're saying, the undeniable effect of the conversation that Schindler's List was able to force everyone to have, being such a culturally important movie, and a movie that even when they air it on broadcast television for the first time 4 or 5 years after, they're like, it will air in its entirety without commercial breaks and no edits.
And the ratings are even higher than the color premiere of Nebraska.
It was, at the time, I think 20 million people watched Schindler's List play as a Sunday night network TV movie. It was the highest ratings any TV broadcast of a theatrical film had gotten since Jurassic Park. And they played it without cuts, without commercial interruption, with nudity, with no censoring. And there was the sense of just this is so important.
Tom Coburn, who was a senator, I think he was a congressman at the time, who back then was one of the most psychotic Republicans around, now would probably be a pillar of decency in that party.
But was what if a child changes the channel and sees a nipple?
No, it was beyond that. He was this is an all-time low, nudity, violence, profanity. I do love the idea that he's this Schindler's got a body now.
It's even worse than The Simpsons.
Shit for it that he had to publicly apologize. Of course, now he would become Secretary of Commerce for behaving that way. Probably,
but that speaks to how active the conversation was around this movie for years. Beyond it just being a film that basically immediately went into school rotation, a thing that is shown, a thing that does start to transform it into homework. Then you have all these shitty prestige, World War II movies, and then you have the good films that come out of it are art house intellectual exercises that are critically very respected, but are not engaging in a mainstream conversation.
As a teenager, though, this movie, look, Saving Private Ryan was the serious Spielberg movie that all teen boys were oh shit, have you seen that?
Barry Pepper shot that guy through the scope
talking
of
about it they watched a fucking awesome action movie, which it is, but it's also very serious. But people would talk about the most visceral scenes in this movie, kind of you had seen a horror movie. I remember that kind of teen boy
That's the
discussion.
Impact of having Spielberg do it.
And the scene of Fiennes trying to shoot the guy and the gun won't work. These scenes that are drawn out torture.
Right. I mean, there is a lot of consternation about the suspense of showing the Jewish women going into the showers.
That's the scene that Hanukkah always focuses on.
Right. And one, that actually happened. And two, I mean, I think that suspense is one of the film's tools to engaging viewers in participating and acknowledging history. I think, again, this Village Voice Symposium that came out, you have someone like Art Spiegelman, who, other than Brian Michael Bendis, who, by the way, sounds fucking exactly like Paul
You're
Shear.
not the first to point this out.
Is the only other graphic novelist whose name I recognize. So you guys got to get Spiegelman on the show. Mouse, a classic.
Hey,
but
big Spiegelman,
Spiegelman hated this movie.
Yeah.
And I think
A lot of people who like are very involved in telling stories about the Holocaust hated
Claude
this movie.
Lanzmann didn't like this movie.
Yeah.
I'm aware.
And he thought that it was
Claude
too-
Lanzmann, a bit of a grump, I will say.
Sure, but I think, look, this is such sensitive, complicated subject matter that I think anyone who has spent so much time digging in and trying to figure out the responsible way to depict it is going to then butt against what other people landed on.
Yes, but I think that and this isn't to take anything away from Art Spiegelman, who again, Mouse is a formative text for me, and he was the son directly of a Holocaust survivor.
He also created the Garbage Pail Kids.
I didn't know that, and also, but he did have a huge beef with Spielberg going into this movie because of American Tail, which he thought was a ripoff.
Yes.
But he just felt like it was.
I mean, points were made. I mean,
he's not.
yeah.
Totally.
Listen, but we all also in this house respect Fievel Moskowitz. There's room in my heart for both. But yeah, he was just like, it's just too. I just think that they were. This isn't any point against them, like too close to it.
I just looked it up. Sorry.
He's going to be cast in the new Harry Potter, though. It's good for
I
him.
went on Bill Maher and he said some shit I don't like.
He's selling weird brain pills.
Is he still out west? Did he ever come east?
He went west. He never came back.
He bought a compound in Austin, Texas. He's yoked now.
Well, there turns out there were cats in America. Streets were not paved with cheese.
But I think that they didn't recognize the extent to which our generation's conception of history would be formed by popular culture, by movies. The role, like what they looked as a negative in Spielberg's and his power over the public consciousness, and could have been a negative. I think they underestimated, one, the conversation this movie would create, and two, just the good that it would do to have it on those terms.
I agree. Now, this is what I think I'm trying to get at here, which is like the weird, I don't want to say double-edged sword, but like that this film inspires a bunch of movies that are not as good, that do not hold up as well. Ones that were dead on arrival and ones that were lauded at the time and now feel kind of embarrassing, right? And then the conversation, how we talk about the Holocaust in art, becomes a much headier, more intellectual thing rather than like a mainstream conversation. We're getting far enough away from it. The survivors are dying. It is becoming abstracted. As you said, a lot of the like collective memory or notion of this is kind of in a language, a tone, a look that this film kind of codifies, for better or worse. Obviously, you make a film about any large historical event, it should exist in a dialectic with all other works in that space, right? Like, I always find it frustrating when people critique a movie for being like, but it didn't touch on this, if it is not the first movie to ever cover that area, because the responsibility isn't to do all of it in one film. But this film has lasted in a way that others haven't, while also sort of getting flattened a little bit into like a notion of it being a homework movie, which I don't think it is in practice if you're watching it, which then allows for, in like decades since there has been any work that has touched on this in a way that actually reached this widely, we start to now be far enough away that we're losing sight of what is going on, which leads to a present moment where you have like 3 or 4 different terrifying misinterpretations of what should we take away from the Holocaust that are happening on a colossal scale on our planet.
But I do think like that, that plays into the entertainment value of it, which I think the movie needs to be as compelling as it is for new generations to be able to see it and come in and recognize the urgency of what the movie's saying. Whereas if it were totally, in this rarefied space where we can't really talk about it, we have to talk in hushed tones about the Holocaust, it becomes that much easier to allow something that is, perpetuating the same crimes, but in a different guise to happen again. And, I have to say, we can get to I don't know if we were jumping ahead to the end of the movie, but it is now, the end of this movie crushes me. It always has. We can talk, we will talk, I'm sure.
The
about
sort of the epilogue?
Yeah, I'm talking about the epilogue. I was emotionally overcome the other night, as I always am, by all of these people, by the collapse of history of the actors and the people they're playing.
That is such an incredible touch.
Putting the rose on Schindler's grave and whatnot, the stones. But I think it has an extra dimension, a regrettably extra dimension of tragedy to me now, in that Israel, representing what Israel has become, which is like, it's this point you see in the movie, we can't go east, they hate you there, you can't go west, you have to find a homeland of your own. And, I think it's a dark irony in much the same way as like Jonathan Glazer's Academy Award speech called attention to about, the subject matter of the zone of interest, which people are very normal about.
Which does kind of prove the point I feel like we're dancing around here, where it's like for that movie to be so lauded by the Academy while being a very small movie in the grand scheme of things, and yet have that percentage of the people in the audience who had voted for the film get angry at the speech where he is just stating what the movie is about.
Yeah, but like the never again of it all just doesn't hold water when you see the end of Schindler's List, and they're now in a country that is perpetuating similar crimes on another, and it's just it's the unbearable. It's the idea that this is going to happen and happen and happen throughout history, and why I think in this moment in particular, I find it more resonant rather than less that we're focusing on someone who is in power in the movie, a character with agency who found some sort of moral center and awakening, who used his capital for good, because these are the people that we are most reliant upon right now.
And these situations feel powerless.
We're like reliant on or like being crushed by, like, sort of.
I mean, the never again of it all is the thing I have been stewing on so much for the last, 18 months of our hellscape, right? In a larger 10-year hellscape, in a larger centuries-long hellscape. But there is this sense of muddling of what this movie is, not just this movie's about, but the sentiment that this movie is born out of, that I feel like is very similar, not to take too big of a swing here, but the kind of like perversion of the abstract idea of the teachings of Christ to then like alienate persecuted groups, right?
You're saying that Christianity has participated in the oppression?
This is the first time hearing about this, but I'm going to hear him out.
I'm saying that like all of this shit keeps happening where we're like, great, I got it. You're giving me the one sentence. That's the thing I never forget. Right, never again. And then people lose sight of when they're like doing the thing again, when they're actually acting the exact opposite of the mantra that they have now abstracted into a way where it can be twisted to their own means, or just fucking lose sight of it.
And while, the ending of Schindler's List is obviously laudatory towards the existence of Israel in that sense, it is that threading the needle, collapsing the space, whatever you want to call it, between the past and the present is something that's so instrumental to what this movie is doing. I think that's why those bookends work so well, why we start in sort of this like, liminal present state, and then fade into the past, right? I think it's saying that this is a part of our world. This cannot be separated or compartmentalized. And when we do that, we invite it to happen again. And and
the perversion of the never again doesn't mean we can't let this happen to the Jews ever again. There is a larger responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen in our world again. And that twisting has led to like such horrors.
And I was afraid that I hadn't really dug too much into it because I'm very clear on where I stand, and I don't know. I don't need to parse what certain celebrities have to say, but with Spielberg, it's different because in my mind, and maybe you can understand this, like Spielberg is sort of like the great Jew of my lifetime.
He has become like a weird kind of cultural ambassador.
And I don't mean that morally. I just sort of mean that in his stature.
Like a very famous Jewish person who just speaks on and
and I think already was, but then this movie makes it like, okay, great. So he's like the prominent Jew in American pop culture.
Right. And that pop culture was sort of my lingua franca, my whole life. This is where I wanted to interact with Jewishness. It was always more interesting to me that Superman was Jewish than reading the fucking Talmud. You don't read the Talmud, but you know what I mean. And so his comments in the wake of October 7th, I was always very afraid of what they might say. And I was reading them over last night, and I just couldn't imagine that someone who made Schindler's List would look at this and be like, would see it, in the worst possible light. It's like totally disconnected from what had happened. And maybe he said some things that I didn't see when searching the internet, but at best I could tell,
he really only made public comments about it.
He was saying, as someone who then founded the Shoah Institute and is going to be asked to for comment on something like this, he made mention of the Palestinian people and was talking about, their suffering in the same breath as lamenting the deaths of the
I would say,
Israelis on October 7th. And it seemed like, he's not going to be the guy who is coming out with Free Palestine, hashtag. But
maybe he could, though.
I would love that for him. That would really surpass my expectations.
So incredibly impactful.
I don't know. I mean, he's obviously, he's a fairly, I think, long been like a fairly sort of straightforwardly supportive of the state of Israel person. But yes, he's not. I'm just saying, like there's a certain sort of streak of celebrity who became, very, very polemical in a way that was kind of disturbing. He's certainly
sure. Yeah, no, he's not. Amy Schumer or Deborah Messing
released kind of measured statements on the facts of
But I would have, rather than saying that like I didn't have any realistic hope for him to be like a leading voice in this issue, but I would have been heartbroken had he come out and said something unequivocally in support of Israel.
The IDF rocks,
right?
Like,
and
love them. No, and he talked about
doing a photo
killing
shoot
women
like
and children
Seinfeld.
in Gaza,
Right?
Well, Jerry Seinfeld's like a really normal dude. With normal behavior.
I mean, this is part of you.
Great director, though. Unfrosted.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy.
Laughed for days.
I laughed a couple times.
That movie is well shot. It got
It's
Bill
Lens,
Pope.
baby.
It got Bill Pope.
It does. I know. I didn't mind Unfrosted.
I didn't hate it either.
I mean, one of the great trials of my life was watching and writing about that movie, but teach their own.
What I would like
Toughest 93 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
No, I think watching this movie in 2003, right? When there were not as clear, sort of screamed, underlined parallels in the current situation of the world.
You're thinking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' recent triumph at the Super Bowl.
That was top of my mind 24/7 in 2003.
You're excited for the release of the Return of the King. I'm trying to think of 2003 stuff. Yep.
Radiohead's on tour. You got to catch them at MSG.
That's true.
So
I
good.
saw Radiohead. That's the Hail to the Thief.
It sure was.
It was great.
Radicalized me that
They
summer.
opened with the gloaming.
Gloaming Live. Fucking rocks. Anyway.
Real loud.
I'm trying to remember what my point was.
It's 2003. You're watching Schindler's List.
Right. This feeling that I think it sounds like all three of us had watching the film as young men, being like, how the fuck does this happen? Like looking to this movie for answers of how could such a thing happen? Because I feel like if you are a Jewish child, a couple generations away, like we were, you learn about this in a very large,
100%.
sort of like.
It's not like I was like, wait, what's this now?
Right.
I certainly had been educated.
And you start pulling at strings and going like, wait, what do you mean? How is that possible? Like, how much of the terror am I allowed to dig into at this point, right? How do I understand the steps of something escalating to this kind of point? And you watch a movie like this and you're just like, how were there not like thousands of Oscar Schindlers? How were there not more people standing up and like objecting and all this sort of shit? And
I think an amazing and sort of forgotten scene in the movies where he's talking to the other businessman, trying to get him on board. And the guy's like, I already did a lot. And you're kind of like, you haven't fucking done anything. Like, but to him, even the slightest,
right.
Anyway,
if we're like policing, like, why hasn't Spielberg like taken more of a stance, right? Why hasn't he used his power more, like deliberating all this stuff? This is my point. A lot of what I've struggled to deal with in the last year is like, I don't know if any of this fucking works anymore. Like, I don't know if any of this has any fucking impact anymore. It is like really kind of overwhelming to be like, there has been such a loud conversation going on for so long in what feels like kind of an immovable issue.
As I do, unfortunately, think that it does. Well, maybe not. Unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, the fallout of Jonathan Glazer's Oscar speech was really blew my mind.
So sobering,
and
in a horrible way.
I felt for Glazer because I feel like he was incrably nervous.
Yeah,
but it's also like, this is what the Griffin said. Like, this is what the movie's about.
You don't have to fucking tell me. Sorry.
He threw his wallet at me, and I'm keeping it.
Yeah, you're taking anything you want from that.
No, I threw my wallet at Early because I already threw something else at him. I know, but like I felt like it's not like he bobbled the speech at all, but like you could feel he was so nervous, and the speech has kind of like a rhetorical, in my memory, kind of like, device to it, right? Where he's like, and like people misinterpreted the language right away in bad
willfully,
faith. Yeah. Exactly. But I felt so frustrated because I was like, I know what he was trying to say, and I think you do too, and you're like, putting a comma somewhere essentially to kind of make it work for you. And it was really infuriating.
Let me throw this out.
Unlike like Michael Moore getting up there and yelling, where I'm like, well, some people are just not going to enjoy Michael Moore yelling at them.
And then Billy Crystal makes a joke about him being
people,
shoved in a trunk and people applaud.
The cognitive dissonance to do this.
It was a pretty good joke.
The cognitive dissonance to do this like blows my mind.
Oh, you're right.
But some people did watch Zone of Interest and did not pick up on any of that.
No,
they were just
when,
like, oh, wow, this is really about the Holocaust, and they should have known.
Right. This is why we have to make sure that Jewish people are never persecuted against again. That was their entire reading of the film.
Right. I mean, maybe we should cut
this
all
myopic
this out
thing
of this
that keeps
episode.
happening. We have to
going
keep
to be bad faith interpreted by people.
Or triple it, because, I mean,
I really don't think we should triple it, because that would really take a long time.
Just put like a deep reverb on it that makes it sound like everything we said is heard 3 times. But I think that like what we went through for the past, and I say this as someone who was writing about movies, writing about Zone of Interest, writing about other, Holocaust and Israel adjacent movies. And
you have not
internet.
Avoided talking about these things.
I have been very clear-throated. I mean, I feel like I have mortally fortified as been on any subject that I've ever spoken about the enormity of the wrong that Israel has
people
perpetrated.
Said I was wrong. People over here said I was wrong to book David Ehrlich.
I think you were wrong. I said that you were framing it as he's desperate to come on, and he was framing it as I'm being hounded by Sims.
Well, he's always framing it that way.
Continue your point, Mr. Ehrlich.
No, it's just that like there was a time, and it feels only slightly diminished recently, where to even name the crime that Israel has been perpetuating was verboten, to really mix my German and modern politics. But like I would have to go through rounds of legalese to use the word genocide and make sure that there were governing bodies in the world that I could link to back up my decision to use such a word. And I would be accused, I'm not going to name names or go into specifics, but like there were heated incidents, some of which I definitely went out of my way to invite upon myself that, whatever. But yeah, I know. And some of which took me by surprise, where the language I was using was policed and seen as being aggressive. And it did not feel safe for a person employed by anyone other than themselves or by a large company to, even a Jew, the grandson of Holocaust survivors, to say that what was going on. And I was like, I can speak to this issue in a more full-throated way than I can to almost any other of the world's great atrocities of my lifetime. And even so, was still getting blowback for it, and mostly from other members, ostensibly, of my community. And that, it really has. It's really soured me on a lot of different things over the last 18 months or so. It's been really painful to watch.
Look, I think it is an incredible microcosm through which to underline all of the kind of social evils of social media, of like the actual damage it is wrecking upon like our brains and our society and all of that sort of shit. When I say like I don't know if any of this matters anymore, I'm working hard to not fall into a level of despondency that is, so why even bother doing any of it? But I think what I spin on is like, let's say Glazer had somehow done the impossible and like perfectly worded the speech in a way that no one could
given
object.
Some speech that everyone was like, wow, he's really thrown things into context.
Within 30 seconds, people are doing jerk-off motions going, oh, liberal Hollywood elites in their bubble. Because even the idea of that happening at the Oscars doesn't mean the same thing it used to mean anymore. Like everything is so blown up and so like endlessly expansive in a way, and is so loud, and just this constant pit of screaming.
And of course, I think to someone like Glazer, and I sympathize with this greatly, it shouldn't be that controversial to say, hey, remember that, people defining thing that they did to us less than 100 years ago? Maybe we shouldn't do something similar to that to someone else. Maybe we should actually learn from that and behave differently. I mean, it would seem to be a benign statement, but
it is part of in certain ways, it is a danger of the death of the monoculture, right? Of just people being like, well, I'm going to my own sources. I'm existing in my own bubble. I'm looking at what my social media feed is and what I watch, which outlets I pay attention to and whatever. And in other ways, the scary part is like the control of those outlets in certain ways, and the bents that things are taking. It's a fucking nightmare situation.
At the Oscars where Steven, he and I are very close. Stevie, he says that, he wants to accept this on behalf of the 1 billion people watching, on behalf of the 6 million who perished, 6 million Jews in Poland. But like a billion people, I mean, really, you have the feeling watching that ceremony that really this was the center of the universe.
And I will say that, though, the Oscars always used to say that.
Never
they were like,
true.
1 billion people watch the Oscars. And you're like, no, they don't. What are you talking about?
But the Jonathan Glazer speech was one of the few moments where it did suddenly feel like the Oscars were back at the center of the universe to some limited extent for a half second.
It was also just one of those things where it was like, I wonder if he'll like, make a speech versus like, going up there and being like, well, thank you. This film was hard to make, and I'm glad.
It's going to be very interesting in like 4 days from when we're recording this to see if and hopefully when No Other Land wins Best Documentary.
That will be interesting.
What
I imagine it's going to win. It seems like,
which is so. I mean, it's so wild that Glazer's speech would trigger that reaction a year ago among so many people in Hollywood. Obviously, maybe not a majority, but enough. And then you would have that same body award such an outspoken, film.
But that movie has the narrative of like who made it. And look, we're getting very deep in the weeds. Have you guys? I've shouted this movie out before. I'm moving us to a slightly different tack here.
By the way, you're never getting your wallet back.
No, it's mine now.
It's fine.
He threw a wallet at a Jewish. It felt like an anti-Semitic attack.
It's because I love you so much. Have you ever seen? I've shouted out before the HBO TV movie directed by Frank Pearson, Conspiracy.
No.
It was acclaimed at the time, won Emmys. Like, it was not like a forgotten movie or anything, but it's a TV movie. I've seen it kind of a disturbing amount of times considering it's a movie about Nazis planning the final solution. It is incredible. And I feel like it gets no recognition. 2001.
It's called Conspiracy?
It's called Conspiracy. It stars Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, I remember
Colin
this poster.
Isn't there a scene in K Street where somebody goes to see Schindler's List?
I don't know. I can't answer that question for you. And if I had my wallet,
this image?
Oh, sure.
I feel like I saw this poster.
You saw a poster of.
Is it called K Street?
It's a K Street is an HBO show. Yes,
okay. Yes. Okay.
It was the Soderbergh.
It's about lobbyists. Weirdly, people were not that interested. I don't know why.
Even though it starred America's favorite TV star James Carville.
The whole thing, it was like classic Soderbergh where he's like, well, what if I just like point cameras at lobbyists? HBO will be interested, right? Like nobody fucking... Anyway, I highly recommend it as a sort of flip side because it's an incredibly simple film. It's basically set at a big table. There's basically nothing to it. It's about the real Vanassi, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, conference in 1942 where Heydrich, who was a high-ranking Nazi at the time, basically like gathered a bunch of people and was like...
The Corner, not K Street. The Corner.
What was The Corner? Now we got...
The Corner is David Simon's miniseries that basically was like...
As soon as you said James Carville, I was like, there's no fucking way he was
I wish so badly that I had the wallet back.
Well, you
now you deserve it to the dome.
And you can't.
You only get one wallet. That's the problem.
He gathers the high-ranking Nazis and is like, Hitler has ordered us to exterminate the Jews in like beyond what we've been doing in a uniform way, and we're here to figure out exactly how to do it. And it's amazingly acted because it's so procedural and like there's nothing more chilling than watching people discuss this stuff as sort of a matter of fact. Like and there are moments obviously where like things get more bigoted and intense or whatever. And there's also moments where it's just like fucking German army, big shots arguing, like having little turf wars with each other. It fucking rocks.
I have a question about it. I'm interested. Does America get a shout out?
In Conspiracy?
Mm-hmm.
Wait.
Because of course it's been found.
That America like kind of knew what was going on. Oh, okay. What are you talking about?
It was found and I'm pretty sure it was during the specific meetings that you're shouting out, that they were looking to America in the way that we suppressed African Americans.
Yes, I do think some of that
they could then incorporate into what they were doing to the Jews.
I think they do briefly mention something like that. I can't remember, but I know what you're talking about.
Species we have here.
Yeah, yep.
Lovely series of governments.
Just a nice reminder. Yeah. Sorry to pile on bummer.
No, but that's what's so interesting is that you watch fascinating, disturbing, distressing. Like you watch Schindler's List and you're 15 years old, you're David, me or Ehrlich, and you're like, I have so many questions.
David.
Or Ben.
I would choose Sims.
Oh, get out of here. Come on. You must have been cool.
No. your entire audience just giving the biggest laugh this whole episode.
You were a cutie pie. Elisa recently sent me a picture of you in college and we were both like, what a cutie pie he was. You're watching and you're like, but how could this not just like happen? It's just like, you're telling me there was like sort of, what I'm talking about. Like, like people writing things down and making plans and being like, yeah, use that railroad. That one's good. Like,
going through rounds
use Auschwitz.
Of approval.
Auschwitz is really good because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, so no one will see what's going on. So they know they don't want anyone to see what's going. You know what I mean? Like all of those thoughts. It's just like every time you think about like the thought process or the conversations people had, you're like, how did this, continue? Like, how did it not stop there or there?
Something that I think allows Schindler's List to not spin into the maudlin or really get overly or any sentimental toward until the very end is it's focused on bureaucracy from the start. I mean, this is a story about paperwork. The first line in the movie, other than the prayer in the prologue, is someone being like, name, and then you see them just taking down names throughout the movie. It's all just a drama of, trying not to create more paperwork or less paperwork, and everyone just, and then of course the miracle of it all is solved by paperwork effectively at the end.
It is interesting that
the most thrilling thing they do is Kingsley fucking burning up that typewriter. At the end. Yeah.
It is interesting that Amistad is so transparently him trying to make his Schindler's List for slavery, and the actual successful version is Lincoln, which once again takes the approach of bureaucracy, where it's like the way this gets settled is through like an absolute like king shit working of our fucked system.
But I think Amistad, he thought he had it too, where it's like, well, what's interesting is they put on trial the notion of were they allowed to do this? Were they allowed to overthrow their masters on this boat?
I think this speaks to
he just thought that's another way to get at that question, right? In like a non and like it's not like Amistad's a bad movie. I mean, we put out 53 great minutes on it. You can go listen to anytime.
And then a 4-hour episode.
Maybe we should re-Amistad.
Our ad reads are 53 minutes long though. I will say this. I mean, working on my ultimate Spielberg ranking that we'll do at the end of this episode, I was just like, man, 10 of these I need to rewatch.
But I do think that
and Amistad is one of them where I'm like, I would like to watch it again. But I think Amistad does then rely on magic movie stars giving the great monologues to sell it versus the biggest Lincoln monologues in Lincoln happen behind closed doors for 2 people. And then the real action is him sending out fucking,
Spader and Hawks
to work it and massage it and all this sort of stuff. In the same way as Schindler, where it's you have to kind of just wheel and deal to trick people into doing the right thing.
This speaks to another one of the prevailing interests of Spielberg's career, which is his fascination with how history is told, how it's written. And you see it even in a film like The Post, which I think is underrated from the one time that I saw it.
Which he also knows that he is one of the people who now is writing history, that anything he depicts
there is that twinned awareness, which I think, he was aware to some degree in Schindler's List, and then his fame grew, I think became even more pronounced. But he is aware that he is Hollywoodizing everything he touches and perverting the historical record to some degree.
He's trying to do it responsibly rather than denying it.
And I think, his films have a very sort of textual emphasis on what it means to create history, to write these stories, what the decisions are that go into that, and really the documents and the paperwork that form the lives of the people that they touch. You see it across history.
In Lincoln, what we're watching is the Civil War is about to end. They've essentially, quote unquote, won. And Lincoln is like, well, we need to write this shit down. We need to put it in the Constitution before the Southern states rejoin, before there's no chance of it ever happening. And everyone around him is like, do we have to? We won. It's fine.
Take the W.
Right.
Walk away.
And that's a lot of work. It's hard. You have to use all your political capital on this, yada, 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 right? And he's like, no, I understand that this is going to be pivotal. And the movie has hindsight, so it knows it's pivotal, but nonetheless.
He also is I have theater tickets 6 months from now, so we could get it done within that window. I want to be able to see a play and not have this on my mind. We got 6 months.
A little bit more paperwork would have saved him.
In Schindler's List, what's so crazy is that there's an awful thing happens in front of Oscar Schindler every 5 minutes, and he's laughing it off. Now, he's trying to survive, like Ben saying, and just sort of skate by, or right, just hey, man, this is the way it is. But he's in the middle of insanity. Whereas on Amistad and Lincoln, it's kind of well, we know about the insanity, but we're over here in Washington and we're kind of trying to untangle it.
But this
legally.
guy has been, right, unlike Lincoln, Schindler, let's also call out.
Neeson was supposed to be Lincoln, yeah.
Yes, he
for
was.
10 years.
I know. We talk about it on Lincoln.
But I just want to say it in this episode. For 10 years, Lincoln was Spielberg's Schindler Part 2, where he was I'm not yet ready, but I know I want to make it.
That man was a tall drink of water.
That whole decade, it was Neeson supposed to do it. And then when he finally got the script and was Liam, I'm ready to go, Liam's I'm not the right guy. And it
Not
was
the right guy.
It was a correct decision. Like it
Is
would have.
anyone going to take Lincoln's daughter?
I have to shoot a whole movie in a parked car.
I was so excited about the idea of Neeson playing.
There was
Lincoln.
some Photoshop that went around.
Yeah.
You probably remember
Yes.
it, like in those early days of the
Yes.
internet, where like someone had photoshopped the beard on him,
Yeah.
and it was like, "This is gonna rock."
It's gonna rock, right? But it beyond the fact that it's just like you're never gonna get a better performance than you got from Danny Day playing Lincoln.
Dan
also-
crushed, I gotta say.
I think
Wait, your buddy Dan,
yeah.
Big D.
a
Now,
Neeson Lincoln coming out 1 year after Taken.
Would have been a swing. Would have
Hey,
been a real
man.
pivot.
It's fun to imagine.
Circumstance of timing, it would have flipped people's brains.
I am going all in on the hope that the Naked Gun remake this summer brings Neeson
Look,
all the way
we
back
are-
around.
We
in a new
all
dimension.
have our eggs in that basket. I would say,
There's
if
like-
you looked at the eggs in that basket, they have the blank check logo on them.
It's
all
crazy.
over them.
There's so many things at stake on that movie, which I'm just
The
asking to
future
be
of theatrical comedy.
Right.
silly and
Right.
consistently funny.
Neeson not just making movies set in parked cars.
I'm like, it potentially opens up the final, last golden phase of Neeson's career.
Because like the other movie he's making is called Cold Storage, and I don't know what it's about, but
Right.
here's my guess.
His
He's like
fourth
shooting
movie
8
with
people.
cold in the title in the last 4 months.
I do just want to, talking about Neeson in like a funny vein.
He's got Cold Pursuit and like cold trucks.
Yeah, dude, he's the Ice Road, but yeah.
I mean, the
like,
Ice Road fucking blows. Cold Pursuit is a
Cold
really
Pursuit's pretty
solid
good.
movie
Yeah.
that had the
Cold
misfortune of
Pursuit
being
is-
the movie
yes,
that
where
he was on
did
the press
disaster press
Yeah.
tour.
But
and one more thing, Robin. And she's like, not one more thing. Turn his mic off.
stop there.
If I can add further context.
But there is, I mean, Liam Neeson's not in this sequence, although he precipitates it. But like, I do, every time I watch this movie, I am blown away by what has to be the most darkly comic sequence in maybe all of the last 30 some odd years of American film.
Until
which is
Naked
the
Gun
I-
2025 comes
Of course, which is the I pardon you sequence in Schindler's List, where Schindler prevails on Goethe to show mercy. Says power is not control. Power is that we have the ability to kill these people and we don't. And then in what is uncomfortably a comic sequence, I'm on pardons. Follows the rule of three. It's like an SNL sketch. I mean, like he pardons one person and another, and he's like working against his demons and looking at himself in the mirror rather, and then it
Well, he does
ultimately
the thing where he like moves his hair
Yeah.
across his face. Yeah.
and he's sort of studying himself, and then in typically Spielbergian fashion, the way the information comes out, I mean, he cannot commit to having any sort of redeeming qualities, and he ends up murdering Leszek. But it is a. I mean, again, when I think of the sequences that sort of define Schindler's List and are able to thread the needle between these very contrasting energies, having that sort of like gallows humor is an understatement, like the incredibly morbid humor here, and making it like you don't laugh when you're watching that, but it is inherently comic. It's not The Day the Clown Cried, but like it's funny in its way.
Can we
and
watch
it's
that yet, or you have to like go to West
And
Virginia?
almost.
You have to like go to Fort Knox.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's like a thing in this movie that is so risky that I think pays off so beautifully, which is Schindler basically has no ideology, right? He is so
Not
defined.
that we can tell, apart
by-
from money talks.
Right,
Right.
but that's
It's
really
sort of Chris Tucker's ideology.
he is defined by this sort of sense of like, I haven't quite been able to make a business work, right?
Right.
Like
I never will, really.
I'm sort of a disappointment. My father thinks I'm kind of like a fuck up.
Right.
He's sort of the ultimate large adult son.
very large.
I mean, he's
son.
good at fucking.
He's good at fucking. He's like good at charming people,
Yeah.
but you're like, this guy is sort of like kind of just a dilettante to a certain extent.
100%.
He's like the kind of like grindset mindset, quote unquote, entrepreneur who you're like, who does this guy like?
Pardon me. Okay, carry on.
No, but I'm like, he is the
Schindler's tweets about this were fire.
he is the version. He is like the LinkedIn lunatic of his time in a certain way.
He's
right?
all in on crypto.
We're about to hit the 3-hour mark, and I can tell.
It's getting good.
By the kind of
we haven't
You know,
even talked.
you can tell because I'm getting warm.
We haven't even talked about the liquidation of the ghetto sequence, really, which is like maybe the marquee sequence in Spielberg's
It's
career.
really hard to talk
To
about.
me,
that
the most important scene in this film, or the scene I'm kind of most impressed by the dramatic execution of, because it's not a complicated sequence in terms of the moving pieces as a filmmaker, is the negotiation for Hirsch, right? With the notion of the game of 21. And that you're kind of surprised that Schindler is willing to put his neck out to try to overplay his hand to get this, right? He's had this moment of relation to her in the basement. When he's talking to her, a move that astounds me is that you can see, and a lot of this is Janusz, and a lot of this is David's, visible goosebumps on her skin as he's sort of circling her and trying to get his head around her, and then has that moment of the like, can I kiss you, but not in that way, where you're starting to see these gears turning in this dude. And it's also coming after like the negative response he got to the kiss upstairs and all that sort of shit. Then he goes to Kingsley.
The kiss where he kisses later, he kisses the Jewish woman at the party, like a sustained kiss on the lips, is such an interesting moment because there's no clear indication as to why he is doing it. And that you have to sort of,
once again, to his lack of ideology, which is just like, you know what I like doing? Kissing women.
Yeah, but
why would I judge any set of lips as not worth kissing?
My interpretation for that moment where he's surrounded by Nazis who are looking at each other being like, what the fuck? Knowing that he's breaking the law is at that point, it is sort of a fuck you. I think he's saying like,
interesting. See,
I think it's a fuck you. I think he doesn't need to kiss that woman. I think he's doing it
in the film.
I don't think it is.
That when he gets arrested, that's towards the end.
My read on the movie is like he's sort of taken aback by their response, where he's sort of like, you actually are this disgusted by these people? Like he's sort of like, I thought this was sort of like, let's keep the trains running, let's all like prosper in wealth kind of thing.
That's really when he shows his cards, when he's pouring water on the train car. And he's like, it's completely, like that point, it's unambiguous.
Right.
That he is trying to respect their humanity. And the Nazis are just laughing at him.
You get there, right? Him saying to Kingsley, like, leave one extra slot blank. You don't quite understand why he's doing it. Then it gets to the negotiation where he knows Fiennes is going to pick up on that and makes the play to try to win her, get Hirsch on the list. And Fiennes starts short-circuiting, right? Like, this guy is so unequivocally evil, but in a way where he hates himself for being attracted to her and keeps kind of like tying himself into knots where he's just like, if I want to fuck her, then I must be vermin too. And he's trying to square this circle. And Neeson knows that that's what he can do to make him shut down, where it's like, challenge him on all of this.
He can't push her like the value that she has to him because he will collapse.
Overriding like biological sort of like drive towards this woman is being defeated by his notion of like country and what he represents, which is the exact thing that Schindler lacks, that allows him to gradually go like, wait, this is just a fucking person.
Right.
Why am I treating this as...
Any sort of ideology would be too confining for him to navigate the Holocaust the way that he does.
And the more these people make money for him, the more he's like, well, I'm kind of endeared to these people. They've helped make me a millionaire. Why would I view them as less than? That's so like small-minded to just like categorically group a whole like section of people as less. And you just watch like Fiennes is doing these insane quick turns as he's like pacing back and forth as Neeson is putting him through the paces, being like, yeah, but you're not going to take her to Vienna. Let's be honest here. That's not possible, you know? There's another moment in the movie. I'm trying to remember where it is, but it's earlier. Oh, it's in the conversation, the first conversation in the wine cellar with Helen, where Spielberg deliberately has a cut that fucks continuity, where he goes from one angle to a slightly different angle on a two-shot of both of them. And in the first one, finds his hands are on his hips, and he cuts continuous dialogue and finds his arms are straight down by his side. And it is such a perfect, like, for a movie that is so tight and is so controlled and so disciplined, most people would go like, fuck, you can't do that. That fucks with the austerity of the film. And Spielberg clearly was just like, this is the best combination of performances. I don't fucking care. If that throws people off of the movie, then we have bigger problems, you know? But it's a similar thing of like this scene where Fiennes is just like wanting to punch himself in the face for wanting to kiss her. That I think is such an interesting counterpoint to like, here's this guy who is so dogmatic in what he thinks he needs to do and has certain psychological and biological drives that he cannot override that are tearing him up inside, versus Oskar Schindler being like,
well, it's one character who is at war with his humanity, what little of it is left, and another who is coming to embrace his humanity as the film goes on.
Because as he's starting out, he's just sort of like, I go wherever the money is.
Right.
I don't care about anything.
The advantage that Schindler has over Goethe is that he knows who Amon Goethe is, and the reverse is not true. And that grants him all the power.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. That's how I pronounce it. is not very capable of judging other people's emotions because he has clearly like a mental disorder, which he was diagnosed with by the Nazi Party when they finally kicked him out. He was so bad at his job, he was actually fired, which is so crazy to think about, that they were like, you know, you're not producing enough work, I guess, you know, like, or he was stealing, you know, quote unquote, stealing money. Or
The reveal of the naked woman lying in bed alone. And then you're like, what's she doing? And then cut to him on the balcony with the sniper rifle. And you're like, this guy doesn't want to fuck?
Well, that scene is, yeah, obviously very chilling. And also, it's right how she's like, come on, you know, while he's doing this like unbearable psychotic thing.
And he's like barely taking the time to put his suspenders back on.
Yeah.
He's half naked. Right. Like the drive in this guy is so frightening.
The kiss, just a one weird factoid about the kiss scene earlier was when he kisses the little girl before he kisses the older one on the lips. The woman who that character really is was on set that day. And Neeson
is at the end of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And Neeson goes up to her and kisses her, dressed as Schindler, in the same way as the real Schindler kissed her on the cheeks at that party. And it's just like, that for me sort of epitomizes how the production of this movie was sort of as much of an
there had
art
been
as
cell phone on
itself.
set, and people could be playing Angry Birds in between.
I know.
takes.
It's so crazy to imagine how many cell phones there could
I would have played
been.
so many games of Marvel
What if
Snap
it turns
between takes? I
out
have no
like
idea.
that Spielberg had like a big brick cell phone that he did play like Snake on,
Snake. He was snaking all the time.
and he's actually like completely zoning out the entire
It's like,
movie.
I just need this for my sanity, guys.
There's two ways I'm
Really
getting
heavy
through
shit.
this. Nighttime riffs from Robin and Snake during the day.
But the ghetto sequence is, you know, I think problematic for some because it's so electrifying. And I think, you know, watching it in a vacuum, if I was an alien coming to Earth,
Putting the fucking burying the jewelry in the bread.
I mean, it's as electric as anything in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
it also just starts happening.
I mean, it's, yeah. Well,
Go
you
ahead.
get a speech about how today is history and how he's going to
Yes.
make the history of Jews in Poland.
But when that
again,
speech
it's like-
starts, you're like, holy shit, the movie's up to that point?
That's the thing.
And it's happening this abruptly?
The time of this movie is kind of elastic. You don't, again, have the political background. You know, the title, you know, you have some titles that come up occasionally to be like, okay, now this is what's going on. But you're not understanding the progression of the war. And you're not understanding later, I mean, like that much until you sort of realize like, oh, the war's kind of over. Like, or is whatever. Germany is now on its back foot versus its front foot.
Look,
Yes.
it's a much later film, but I was reminded in rewatching this of Tar, which I think similarly you're watching and you're like, I know where this movie's going. When's it going to happen? And it does the trick of being like, this has gotten
already
further
happened.
along in the background of the story that you're focused on than you realized.
Tar is so good at that where you're
Yes.
like, oh, are we about to methodically watch her get canceled? And then we've actually cut to like, now it's actually,
This has been like
she
9
doesn't
months of her
realize
trying
it,
to
but it's
outrun it.
over.
Right.
But what do
Yeah.
you guys make of the way that it's shot?
She's
Tar rules.
what an amazing
The lady.
movie
I'm
that
saying
is.
Lydia.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Her behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. The liquidation of the ghetto sequence, I think, is I think sort of the fulcrum of where people think the movie's problematic meet where people think the movie is more successful. I don't know. It's just like, it's such an electrifyingly staged sequence, but it's also so horrifying in what it's depicting. And there's like the rush and suspense of people fleeing for their lives. At the same time, they're hurted. Are they going to escape? Can they hide? Who is making the right choices here? I mean, I don't know. I'm throwing it open to the table. I don't really know how to.
I don't have a problem with this. I understand the academic, you know.
I don't have-
objection.
I don't have a
understand
problem
Claude
with the
Lanzmann
sequence either,
objection
but-
of like, right? Can you dramatize any of this? Can you put any mustard on it? As I would say.
It's just
even
such
the
an incredible
slightest,
piece of
slightest
filmmaking.
dab, the thinnest spread of mustard. Yes, you absolutely can. The scene where the women, this is the scene that upsets me the most, realize their kids are on the trucks and start running. It's an incredibly devastating scene. It's also, once again, incredibly well staged by Spielberg. Like the shot of them all suddenly moving. And like, you know, it means you have an indelible memory of something that's like, you know, like you need to know and remember.
Thank you for reminding me of a point I wanted to make. It's one of the
it that
most
they had
effective
no
parts
cell
of this
phones?
film to me.
Yes.
There are no cell phones. There were no cell phones on set during the making of this film. Or at least, let me say smartphones. No, a thought I had while watching this is, as much as he is sort of like, I'm approaching this like a documentary, let the actors figure it out. I'll sort of like adjust around them. I'm not going to like push them into place. There are obviously larger blocking maneuvers
He's
that
very
need to
good
be
visual
worked out.
storyteller. Yes.
And this is such
Steven
an
Spielberg?
Yeah, he's not just like, hey, everyone run around, I'll figure it out. Yeah.
This is such an incredible, like, hundreds, thousands of extras movie in a way that is, like, textually important. And you'll have these Spielberg oneers that, like, start with, two characters talking in a train in the background, and then it follows them off somewhere else. But you can tell that in the background, now out of frame, there are still those hundreds of extras who are existing just outside the perimeters because there wasn't a cut. The camera just moved. They're not just running back off to their trailers or whatever, the crafty table. And it is like a constant reminder of the sheer numbers of people who were involved in this on both sides. And when you see those masses of just like, right, as you're saying, the women running towards the train and they don't stop coming. And you're like, there's more of them. There's more of them. He hasn't run out. The resources to be able to like put that many people on set and to let them exist is the kind of like every one of these people is equally important. Even if the scene is now focused on Liam Neeson's face, you're never forgetting that those people are right there.
Yeah. I mean, there's the feeling that every character you see, both the Jews and the Nazis, are sort of in their own movie over the course of this. And you feel that in the liquidation sequence where I think things that might feel glib, like the Nazi playing Bach on the piano after somebody steps on it and alerts them to their presence. I think that symphonic feeling of it, the triumph sort of over being played over the sorrow and the horror of what's happening, like people being executed summarily at point blank range, in front of people who are sort of like giddily doing their job. I mean, I think it speaks to how well the movie and the energy the movie gets from the confluence of all these different energies that are happening at once, where it's never just the unimaginable horror of what's happening, or it is, but the horror is compounded by the fact that so many other human emotions and experiences are happening at the same time.
Like the shit that Spielberg has always been great at is like having exposition that sets Brody into action in Jaws happening in the background of a oneer, while in the foreground there's like a small like domestic comedy scene playing out with his wife and child, This sort of like his capturing of energy of never letting a scene be only one thing. It is just like, yeah, the amount of sort of like parallel action he is able to stage in a way that isn't canceling itself out is astonishing, because it is part of what needs to be reckoned with, of just like how much was going on at every single moment.
Which is also what pressurizes the ending so much, when all of this expansive, far-reaching energy collapses on this one moment of moral recognition. And with this ring, I could have done more. I could have saved more lives. I think it's a real shift in the density of what we're seeing.
There's the moment where they send the boy out and they're pointing the guns at him, and you're like, fuck, I'm about to watch this kid get shot in the back of the head at point blank. And then it cuts to Kingsley walking, sort of just like trying not to rock the boat. And you're like, oh, I guess the kid survived. And then as the camera is following Kingsley, you see the dead kid lying.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just this sort of like, oh, at the exact moment that someone's surviving, someone else has been like executed in a meaningless way. And the scene with the rabbi where they test him on the hinges, which, let's just say, another great thing about this movie, anytime they show you the way the operations work, the way the pot gets made, that shit is so good. But them like stop watching the hinge, he feels like he's passed the test, and then finds is like, well, but if you can make them that fast, then why are there only this many in the bucket? He's taken out. You're like, I'm about to watch another fucking horrible scene for a guy I've now fallen in love with in 30 seconds. And then the guns won't work. They're jamming up. They're going through multiple guns. It's sustained. In the background, people are escaping. People are getting shot. You're focused in on this one thing. And then only after there've been like 3 false starts with the gun does he say like, I hesitate to even bring this up, but the reason I didn't have the hinges, they had to reset the machinery or whatever, where you're understanding the psychology of this guy in this moment who's like processing, I could die at any second.
The way he flinches every time.
Totally.
The gun clicks.
But also that he's thinking like, should I even say this? If I start to speak to explain myself, do they shoot me even faster? Like, what is the thing that helps me survive this when the chaos of what's going on is so extreme and so all over the place and feels kind of randomized?
I mean, we talked about it earlier, that like so many accounts of people who survived the Holocaust come down to weird flukes of luck.
Or just literally, I stepped out of line and was like, if I step out of line, will anyone catch me? And they don't.
Eamon would... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say the women, when they're pricking their fingers and trying to
rouging up their cheeks
to give themselves like
to look more
alive,
good at working, essentially.
Stronger, more healthy.
That's one of the details. I mean, like
the
all
kid jumping in the toilet, and you're like, I can't believe anyone had to do this. And then there are 4 other kids already in there.
Right.
A lot of these details came from accounts that Spielberg only learned on set.
Yes,
I mean, like the idea of them putting the diamonds in bread and then swallowing them. That was something that someone mentioned to him on set, and he was like, "We have to work this into the movie."
It's also so fascinating as Schindler starts to like buy off German officers things like the lighter and the bag of diamonds later, and him having the breakdown of not selling the car or the pen or whatever. It's like he's selling them on the notion of like, we all know this is going to crash and burn at some point, which makes it all the more terrifying that people are just like, well, I'll just continue carrying out orders until the last possible moment. And then he knows the morality test of that final moment, inviting them into the warehouse and being like, if you really care about this shit, fucking execute them right now. And everyone backs off.
I mean, which is a big swing.
It's a huge swing. But part of it is
really
that,
gambling
like,
with a lot of lives there. But
what is this guy's like superpower at the end of the day? He actually really knows how to read people.
And he's brash. And so much of this, is like, put your money where your mouth is. And some people like Eamon Goth are happy to be psychos all day, and others are just like, I'm just doing my job, which their job is, the world's most unimaginable evil. But
I can understand why some people would be allergic to the end where he's saying, he's breaking down and saying, this ring, I could have done more.
Well, because it's the most Hollywood moment.
Right. But at the same time, I don't know what other catharsis you could have at the end of it.
There's also withheld emotions
Yes.
The entire film.
But it's also the first question I would have of him, where I'm like, why didn't, why did it end up being this many? And why did it take you this long to figure it out? Good for you figuring it out. Weird that more didn't, but
and also
took you a while.
The enormity of what Ben Kingsley says to him, which is that like there'll be generations because of what you did. And you just think about my own life.
But it
so
feels like
people,
something a movie shouldn't do,
remarkable.
Which is have a character kind of be like, what you did is a big deal and will be a big deal. And Neeson being like, are you sure? And he's like, yes. It's like movies should, like historical movies about true stories.
Don't you think that is part of what helps that movie exist in a dialectic with other stories, is that he doesn't present it as like, and this is how the Holocaust was won. This is how we solved the problem.
Sure.
Like the movie then acknowledges like, this is kind of a drop in the bucket, isn't a deeply impactful drop.
Well, but it's like, then, that's why Shoah exists. Right.
I mean, the statistics are mind-blowing. I mean, you see in the movie that there are more people alive because of Oskar Schindler than there are Jews in Poland.
Yeah, it's
right. If you were Jewish, would you live in Poland?
I've never done my real pain trip. I've been back and forth on the idea for so long, and that movie did not really move the needle for me one way or the other. But especially if Kieran Culkin's going to come with me,
I liked that movie. But like.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it didn't make me want to go like buy my plane tickets to Poland and go on the history tour.
I went once and did not do any of the historical things and felt a kind of profound connection to like, this is where my people are from, without needing to really dig into all of that. Maybe I was also like a fucking 20 and afraid of like doing emotionally overwhelming
What I like about that movie is it's him sort of narrativizing his own negotiation with the pain that he's inherited, with other people's pain. To what degree is it healthy to take this on? To what degree do I need to create some space from it? And I know that if I were to go on that tour, and maybe one day I will, I, like Jesse Eisenberg in real life, and like his character in the movie, would be so in my own head about how I should be feeling in this moment, and like the solemnity I should be expressing and internalizing, and how wrong am I to have my thoughts wander about whatever while I'm here, that it would be sort of self-defeating. And hopefully I can reach a point where I could go more pure. But anyway.
Hey, congratulations, guys. We just passed the runtime of Schindler's List.
And we didn't even talk about John Williams.
You know
what I think is the single most iconic film score ever written.
think we did. I think we did a lot, and especially because we need to
do the ranking.
Yeah, I think we should. Wrap up,
I'm going to challenge you on that, though.
I know. I mean, just the theme.
That's
Just
it.
the
Do
theme.
the challenge.
I meant to say theme.
It's a great theme. It is not.
I mean, it's been stuck in my head on a
Okay, back
nonstop
it
loop
up.
for 30 years.
Make the argument.
There are other more iconic.
Oh, there are more iconic film
John
scores.
Williams' Schindler's score.
John
which is
Williams
like
wrote more iconic film scores.
Exactly. He
I'm
wrote
just
like
saying,
5 more iconic
I meant to say most iconic film theme. Just that one piece of music that doesn't
It's a
pop up
lovely
in full until 2 hours, 51 minutes of the movie has literally been in my head on a loop for over 30 years.
That's weird. Go
I
see
know.
a doctor.
It is weird. I've seen
That's a
several.
problem.
None of them can figure it out. But
it's a lovely theme.
Powerful.
The part in the documentary, though, where they're all like the most beautiful thing he'd ever done, and we
I
all
agree with
cried
that.
when we heard it, and it's like Perlman,
Cosign.
and you're just kind of like, it would be funnier if they were saying that about his Terminal score.
Well, it's
They were
not
like,
funny.
the movie's silly, but like his Terminal score, I just started hugging him and was moved to tears.
All right, I got therapy in 25 minutes. Let's go.
We've been talking for so long.
Did this movie win any Oscars?
This film won 7 Academy Awards. I'm shocked it didn't win more, in a way.
I could have won more.
No, I liked that.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest with you.
That was good. Who wins Best Actor this year instead?
Tom Hanks wins for Philadelphia, which is a performance I like, but I would certainly give it to, of the 5 nominees, I would give it to Liam Neeson. I think Neeson's just amazing in this
It's
movie.
his second best performance.
I personally, behind Ted 2.
Yep. Nailed it.
I am allowed to buy this cereal.
Silly rabbit. I personally give it to David Thewlis for Naked, which is like kind of like one of the most insane performances
hard to argue.
ever put on screen.
Yeah.
But
Man.
you could give it to
The Oscars used to have some real heavyweights.
Thewlis was nominated.
But also that year,
Jesus,
Anthony
fuck the
Hopkins
Oscars.
is nominated for Remains of the Day, which is an amazing performance. Larry Fishburne for What's Love Got to Do with It. Like, they're amazing nominations. Anyway, the weirder thing is that it loses supporting actor. Sure, like we said, but like I'm kind of surprised that it lost, like makeup or whatever.
What one makeup?
Hello.
Well,
I guess you can't argue with Madame Doubtfire.
I think that my assessment of the movie being quotable is right.
Hello.
You
Miss Doubtfire
certainly-
or Schindler's List? I think they're both quotable in their own ways.
Both, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think you have helped make "hello" a quote in a way that solidifies your argument. So wait, it wins picture, director,
Correct. Screenplay.
score, screenplay,
Yes.
cinematography,
Yes. of course.
editing.
Yes.
So that's 6. What's the one I'm forgetting? Does it win production design?
Let's see. No, it lost costumes to, I think, Remains of the Day, which, great costumes, beautiful costumes. No, sorry, it lost costumes to The Age of Innocence, but it did win, indeed, art direction.
Okay.
Production design.
Yeah.
And of course, Jurassic Park that year also wins 3 Oscars or whatever. It's it's a hot year for old Steve.
Wins sound and visual effects. And
Yeah, it wins both sounds and visual effects. Jurassic Park, in my opinion, also a good movie. The film opens, well, it's not an opening, it's opening number 14 because it opened in limited release, but it did make close to $100 million, as you said, Griff, 96.
Yeah.
More importantly, 322 worldwide. It was kind of a global hit, I think, in a way that Spielberg might not have
Even
predicted.
though it was banned in about 10 countries.
Oh, those titties. No, I don't know why it was banned.
I mean, it was-
I assume for incredibly anti-Semitic reasons.
Yeah, but they would, in some countries, I believe it was the Philippines,
I think it's
Indonesia, they overruled the ban.
Oh, sure.
And in some countries they didn't.
Oh, it was banned in Indonesia because it's sympathetic to the Jewish cause. It doesn't seem like a great reason to me.
Look, we live in a very complicated world.
So it won Spielberg his Oscar, his long desired Oscar, of course. He looks great at the ceremony. Hair's kind of long, gives lovely speeches, but speeches that are very much like, I'm indebted to, it's like, he can't just get up there and be like, take that, fuckers!
No.
Spielberg's on
No.
top! Which would be interesting if he had done that.
Which it's interesting to think that this is also the Philadelphia year where Hanks gives the famous president of Hollywood speech.
It's definitely a bit of a self-important year.
This is a real,
it's
the
the in and
Oscars
out
are
year,
telling
right?
you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. This is like peak serious speeches of it's not about me. It's about the story. Yeah. And to think that it's Spielberg wins all these Oscars, presumably goes out, parties, wakes up the next morning, and then has to review story reels for Freakazoid.
It is funny.
You think they made him do that at 8 a.m. Monday morning?
I think he did it. I don't want to disrespect Freakazoid in his struggle.
It opens number 14.
It is
on
funny what?
Oh, just to imagine him.
Just how many
like,
plates he had
watching-
spinning
yeah,
at this
like,
time, even if he
that
doesn't
being
make a
so
move
it's
for
the
4
Warner
years.
brothers, but the Warner sister
Right.
Dot is there as well.
Yes.
He's like, will there be a pigeon sort of Goodfellas thing happening in this? Yeah,
Old lady squirrel.
God, everything I learned about The Godfather initially came through Goodfellas. December 17th, 1993, Griffin. So it's opening and limited release. #1 at the box office. It's a fun movie. It's based on a bestseller, a legal bestseller.
Is it The Pelican Brief?
It's Denzel Washington and Julia Roberts in The Pelican
The
Brief.
Pelican Brief.
One of those movies that has sort of gotten reclaimed because I think it kind of slipped through the cracks,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Well, it was a hit.
It was
but it
a
wasn't
hit,
taken
and then people
seriously
kind of
for
forgot about
Pakula,
it. Right.
who usually was a little more serious-minded.
It's him and his dotage a little bit. Famously, Roberts and Denzel don't kiss.
Sure.
Right. Like there's a little bit of like
Yes.
Hollywood cowardice there.
Yes.
Anyway, Pelican Brief opening to a solid $16 million on its way to a very solid 100.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's a fun
Yeah,
movie.
it's a good movie.
little long.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's Pelican long. It's not that brief.
Yeah, Pelican kind of long.
I just canceled my therapy session.
Did you really?
Not. Yeah. I mean, this is more important.
You
That's
can
fine.
get out
We're
of here.
getting ready.
No.
Well, he already
The
did. I'm
people.
not
The
gonna-
people need to know where on my Spielberg list Kingdom of the Crystal Skull falls.
3 days ago, Ehrlich was like, no matter what, you have to promise
I
me
know.
I make it out of here for the therapy session.
But you know what? Griffin wasn't even that late. You were like 5 minutes late.
Thank you.
That's really not making or breaking this right
Let
now.
the
It was
record
like
show.
15 minutes.
I was not.
Mrs. Doubtfire.
I think I was 10. I was the exact midpoint between the
think you're
two
right.
numbers you guys guessed.
I just said what #2 was. Hello. Mrs. Doubtfire. Crushing it. #3. It's a comedy sequel.
It's a comedy sequel. David's eating a fucking ring pot, gummy worm. What the
It's like
fuck?
licorice.
Great. It's great for
It's
Mike.
not
Home Alone
in
2.
my opinion, good guess, but no. And not a good movie. In fact, here's what's crazy. The next 3 movies are all comedy sequels.
Wow.
Possibly a bad idea to have these
Is it
all
Wayne's
come out.
World 2?
This one is
Yeah.
Wayne's World 2.
Yeah, they rushed it.
Wow.
A bad movie.
I was going to say that would
But
have
with
to be
stuff.
94, but I guess.
Yeah, but you know, they finally have explained what happened with that movie. That Mike Myers wrote an entire sequel. He was like, I want to take inspiration from Passport to Plimco.
Pimlico.
Yes.
Yep.
And was
very
like-
funny Ealing
Right.
Brothers movie.
And it's a movie about Wayne starting his own country. And Paramount was like, great, we love it. And he wrote the script and they put it into like active pre-production. And then like 2 weeks before filming, they were like, we fucked up. We didn't get the rights for that movie.
And I forgot about this. I've read this article that you're like,
They made him rewrite the movie from scratch.
beyond
2
that,
weeks
they had
before
to like
filming.
dynamite the sets.
Yes.
No, what's weird about Wayne's World 2 is that, right, the rewrite is, should we just kind of like parody The Doors? like, and you're like, should we?
But that feels like a we have 2 weeks to go
Yeah.
concept. And the one thing they knew is that they had to build to the concert because they had built the stage for the performance.
Seeing that
or
movie
whatever.
in theaters as a 9-year-old who had never even heard of The Doors was confusing.
There's funny stuff in it. But one is a stone cold masterpiece.
You know, there's funny stuff in it, but one is so good.
One
Can
is
we
perfect.
do it on this
Yeah.
show?
Can I make a pitch?
Because I know we thought about Spheris, but like
We've
she's got
talked
a
about
really
Spheris.
long, complicated.
You know how we
filmography.
folded Love Guru into Austin Powers?
Yeah.
I think we fold Axe Murderer into Wayne's World, do those 3.
So do another Myers trilogy.
Yeah, I'm not saying we do it immediately, but I'm
quadrilogy.
saying I want to pin it on the board as an idea.
Yeah.
Because then
just
we
love
basically
one.
covered all the Myers Auteur films.
You guys
that
have to
all
do
of them?
Axe Murderer one way or another.
Yeah.
It's too important.
I think Cat in the Hat, Cat in the Hat's its
Woman.
own fucking thing.
Cat in the Bat in
And
the Hat.
Shrek's its own thing. The ones that he is the driving force is the 3 Powers, the 2 Wayne's Worlds, and Axe Murderer. That's it. It's 6. So I'm like, we could.
We
or
do
7,
important work
sorry.
here. We do
We do.
important work here. It's 3 hours, 30 minutes. Number
Oh,
2.
there actually is a clock above
Oh,
my
yeah.
head. I'm just noticing that.
Yeah, it's just sort of like the anyway. Number 4, it's another sequel. It's new this week. Family movie about a pet.
Oh, it's Beethoven's Second.
That's right.
Is that the funniest title of all time?
I mean, it's a good title.
It's up there.
in my
It's up
memory,
there.
they left work for the day after coming up with the title.
I mean, Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit
It's very
is
good.
up there as well.
well, you've just guessed number 5, my friend.
I figured I was in the neighborhood.
That and Wayne's World are both like, we got a sequel out in under a year.
But it feels like a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
don't rush it and then don't have them all up against each other. Sister Act 2 is the one of those 3 movies where I'm like, that movie's not bad.
No,
that
that movie's
movie
good.
has juice.
The Great Bill Duke.
The great Bill Duke, the great Lauryn Hill. Like, you know, there's stuff going on in Sister Act 2. Beethoven Second, I'm pretty sure they were just like, I don't know, there'll be a girl Beethoven 2. Great, can we go?
Can I make the case for Beethoven's Second as a perfect title?
No, we already agreed with you. This isn't something you need to argue about.
I don't think they greenlit Beethoven 1 being like, and obviously it's a franchise, and then later we can play on the great works of Beethoven.
I remember my dad trying to explain it to me.
I have the same memory.
Right.
I remember your dad trying to explain
Yeah, seriously. Where I was like, why isn't it called Beethoven 2? And he's like, well, so symphony writing, like it was a pain in the ass for him to explain it to a 7-year-old.
Imagine the moment where they were like, wow, I'm checking the books here. Pretty good return on investment in Beethoven. Should we maybe do a Beethoven sequel? And then some guy stands up from behind his desk at Universal. It's like, sorry, I know it's only my second day at the job.
This is a role that you would have played.
I'm remiss if I didn't point out there's an incredible opportunity here.
People in Hollywood do not understand or care about how much of a pain in the ass it is for parents to explain things to their kids. Like when fucking 6 minutes into The Incredibles, you have to explain to your kid how insurance companies work. Brad Bird is not spending a thought about this.
My whole problem with
Mr.
with Cars.
Sansweet didn't ask to be saved. Mr. Sansweet didn't want to be saved.
I mean, I put Cars, I finally gave into Cars in the mistaken thinking that this one would at least explain itself.
No, Cars is the most arcade. We have to explain endorsements.
Like you thought Cars is the one that would explain
Cars is inexplicable.
Cars,
the world's greatest minds, like fucking Zizek is like still like watching Cars being like, I don't know.
Where is the brain?
I didn't think that my kid would get to the like, wait, so they fly on other vehicles who are also
sentient? They go inside Sidley the Spy Jet's butt and they have a conversation with him inside of him.
Also in the top 10, you've got
a vehicle, location, and a character.
You've got Geronimo, an American Legend, Walter Hill film. You've got A Perfect World, great film. You've got The Three Musketeers, lots of fun, saw it in theaters. You have Addams Family Values, ditto. And you've got a little masterpiece called The Piano. A pianer. Now, Steven Spielberg Griffin has made, by my count, 34 films. If you include Jewel.
Yep.
So yeah, give me your top 34 for Steven Spielberg.
I'm just gonna.
We're doing it all the.
Yes,
here
that's
he goes.
What we talked about.
Here he goes.
I prepared and I have a list.
Yep. Okay, I'm just gonna try to do this fast. And some of it I might bump on when I say it, but I'm just locking in the order I have right here. Okay, and I'm shooting from the hip. 34, Hook. 33, 1941. 32, Terminal. 31, The BFG. 30, Ready Player One. 29, Warhorse. 28, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. 27, I don't like that movie. 27, Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Come at me, bro. 26, The Lost World, Jurassic Park. 25, Always, that high basically on the strength of Holly Hunter alone. 24, The Color Purple. 23, The Post. 22, Amistad. We're now in a territory where every movie is basically incredibly good at best, at worst, right? 21, War of the Worlds. 20, Munich. 19, West Side Story. 18, Minority Report. 17, Sugarland Express. 16, Duel. 15, Tintin. 14, Lincoln. 13, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. 12, Jurassic Park. 11, Jaws. 10, Fablemans. 9, Raiders of the Lost Ark. 8, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. 7, Saving Private Ryan. 6, Bridge of Spies, Face the Bridge. 5, the biggest jump up for me in doing this series, Empire of the Sun. Number 4, Catch Me If You Can. Number 3, Schindler's List. Number 2, AI, Artificial Intelligence. Number 1, E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
I'm surprised you have Ryan so high. I wouldn't have thought that.
Look, it's a film I find very difficult to watch. I think it is just kind of undeniable in terms of craft. I mean, that's one where maybe I'm like, do I flip Close Encounters?
You do what you want.
That?
You did what you did.
That's what I listed.
Ehrlich, you did this?
I did this on the fly.
Okay.
I already have great issue with my picks, but I did 34 BFG, 33 Always, 32 Warhorse, 31 Ready Player One, should have been Lawyer, 30 1941, 29 movie I skipped school to go see at 11 in the morning. The day it came out, has not aged well or was good at the time. The Lost World. Number 28, The Terminal. Number 27, Amistad. Number 26, Sugarland Express. 25, Duel. 24, Hook. 23,
that's high for Hook.
Lincoln. 22, The Color Purple. 21.
23, Lincoln?
I said what I said.
Where's
20,
my wallet?
You can't have it back.
24, Hook.
21, I need to see Lincoln again, but it is not, I don't know, never really did much for me. 21, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. 20, West Side Story. 19, The Post. 18, Empire of the Sun. 17, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
I mean, the most Ehrlich move of all time.
Number 16, Minority Report. Number 15, Tom Hanks has a cold in The Bridge of Spies. Number 14, Ace's next favorite movie, The Adventures of Tintin. Should still be a sequel, holding out hope. Number 13, Indiana Jones. I think just Indiana Jones. We call it The Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, we don't. We call this.
You call it Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Nope, we don't. We call this The Last Crusade.
Oh, okay.
Number 12, War of the Worlds. Number 11, Sammy Fableman and the Fablemans. Number 10, Saving Private Ryan. Number 9, E.T. Number 8, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Number 7, another movie that would have complicated my relationship, is Spielberg is Munich. You know what I'm talking about that in context too. Number 6, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Number 5, Jaws. Number 4, masterpiece called Catch Me If You Can. Number 3, Jurassic Park. Number 2, Schindler's List. And number 1, AI, Artificial Intelligence.
Okay, you guys ready for a third one of those? Number 34.
I'm now like, do I put Saving Private Ryan? Do I flip Saving Private Ryan and Jaws? I don't know. Go on.
Number 34, 1941. Number 33, The Terminal. Number 32, Always. Number 31, Hook. Number 30, The BFG. We're exiting bad movies. 2, okay movies.
Yeah, that's like his only bad tier to me.
Right. Number 29, Lost World. Number 28, War Horse. Number 77, Crystal Skull.
These are bad adjacent. Yeah.
Right. Number 26, Amistad. Number 25, Temple of Doom. Number 24, Color Purple. Okay, now we're getting into good movies. Number 23, Sugarland Express. Number 22, Duel. Number 21, Empire of the Sun. I might put that up higher on rewatch, but whatever. Number 20, not that high. Number 20, The Post.
Oh.
Number 19, Tintin. Number 18, Last Crusade. Number 17, Ready Player One. Number 16, Munich. Number 15, War of the Worlds. Now we're in I fucking love this movie territory. Number 14, Catch Me If You Can. Number 13, Bridge of Spies. Number 12, West Side Stories. Number 11, Cuck Brigade. Number 10,
You're calling it
Rogan's Cuck Brigade. Number 10, Lincoln. Number 9, Close Encounters. Number 8, Saving Private Ryan. Number 7, Jurassic Park. Number 6, Raiders. Number 5, Jaws. 4, Schindler's. 3, Colin Farrell, Kiss Me. Number 2, E.T. Number 1, AI, Artificial Intelligence.
Colin Farrell, Kiss You is number 3?
Yeah, Minority Report. That's one of the best movies ever made.
I'm officially flipping Saving Private Ryan and Jaws in the order.
Take note, people who listen to that drivel.
Otherwise staying the same.
But yes, I think it's interesting that we all have AI right near the top.
Uh-huh.
I think it's interesting that you fools don't understand Ready Player One is good. I don't think it's that interesting. Most
Look,
people
I
agree with
bought the 3D Blu-ray, and someday I will fire it up and give it another
I have a
shot.
steal.
Well, they didn't put the 3D out on Steel, so I bought the 4K Steel, and then I bought the 3D Blu-ray,
Right,
and I put that in my
And
case.
people
so
who
I
do
have-
that are on a government watch
I've
list.
created my own combo pack.
Is Catch Me If You Can generally accepted as being one of his top tier films now?
I think it has of late become generally
But
accepted, yes.
I think all three of us put it a touch higher than most would.
Well, I have it lower than you guys, but I also, like, once we're in that top 15,
Yeah.
we're in 5-star territory.
I'm
for
like,
Cincy.
I mean, everything I feel like in my top 20 is 4 stars and above.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
If not even more than that.
Stevie, you've made me some nice movies.
This
over
is the
years.
thing.
And for that, I say, mwah, thank you.
Any of our rankings that seem rude, it's like the guy made too many fucking great movies. And even the ones I don't like all have some of the best things I've ever seen in a movie.
Early, because the last episode you were on Eyes Wide Shut, no, you did Vengeance after that. Because Eyes Wide Shut went this long. Not quite this
Should have
long.
gone longer.
Sure. This one went really long.
I need to pee very badly. Ehrlich, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. You know,
May your memory be a blessing.
I feel safe in saying that I have now done the single least funny episode of Blank Check, a badge that I wear with honor.
That's not true.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a good time. I think there are less funny episodes too. Once again, Amistad, 53 minutes soaking wet. I was just being like, what do we say?
We could do a better job.
Yeah, let's go back and do the second half of Spielberg again. Let's run it back.
You could do like a How to Train Your Dragon where just like one element remains CG and throw it everywhere. It's fucking psychotic that they are just at this point now just keeping the same CGI elements of the original movie and now just putting human beings around them. It's
the other dragons at least are a little more redesigned, but Toothless looks fucking 98% exactly the same with the same director and Gerard Butler. I saw an interview with Dean DeBlois yesterday, got fed to me on YouTube of him in 2020 saying how morally bankrupt he thinks it is that the animation studios are remaking their own movies in live action.
Well, you know what helps you be less physically bankrupt is making movies like that.
And like pigs to the slop, I will be taking my kid opening weekend.
Of course. Anything you want to plug?
No.
Great.
Fighting in the War Room, your podcast.
Terrible podcast. Don't
It's a
listen
good
to it.
podcast for smart people.
It's even more of me if you can stand it, and you probably can't. I don't know. I write on IndieWire, I write about movies. I think a lot of the people listening to the show are aware of that and wish they weren't.
No one has ever had a weird opinion about your movie writing ever.
And they never will. What do I want to plug? My deck on Marvel Snap is fucking crushing it right now.
Wow. You just inherited a new wallet full of different payment methods.
I have new credit cards. What can I spend before Sims cancels
look,
them?
if the first name's the same, it's all
half
good.
the battle.
Who's going to check?
I have 2 kids.
Hey, your kids rule.
You can follow their progress on Instagram, I
Two
guess.
of the best kids in the game.
Yeah, I don't know.
You should shout out that best of the year.
Your concept-
That's ancient news
it'll
by
been
now.
a while.
I mean, I did have a fundraiser that is related to this episode in support of, for the second year in a row, with people of Gaza. This year was for the Palestine Red Crescent Society. The amount of shit that GoFundMe has given every step of the way in vetting this account to make sure that I'm not abetting their definition of terrorism, or whatever, has been insane. I've been able to get all the money out and to Palestine, but they have currently shut down the page for it anyway. It's
Internet
been a whole
is bad.
fucking nightmare, but I've been very proud and happy to have been able to raise money for the people of Palestine. And that has brought me joy. Related to it is that video I put together, but is seemingly inconsequential in comparison. But yes, I do that. And this episode is not well timed for me to promote that, but maybe I can come on in the fall.
Ehrlich, do you know which filmmaker we're doing next?
Somewhere in my brain, I know, but
Why don't
I
you
think,
announce it?
what am I looking at? Oh, sure. Yeah. Great.
How about this? How about a killer 3 DVD box set?
That's going to be a good episode.
Well, we're announcing right now, of course, that next we are doing Amy Heckerling. Nobody has guessed this or seen it coming as usual. The films of Amy Heckerling, guys.
Next week, we're straight into Fast Times at Ridgemont High
I believe so.
with returning guest Lola Kirk.
That's right.
Yes.
Now, some of these movies, are they going to be kind of hard for people to get access to, or is it all more or less streamable?
Johnny Dangerously, I think, is the only one where it's like quite a pickle, right?
Yes.
Some of them are maybe not as like rentable on iTunes. I don't know.
Look, I'll say this is a great time to fire up a VPN if you have one and start
Sure.
scanning the internet.
Right.
Johnny Dangerously is the one that's like pretty out of circulation, but maybe
think
that
the others
magically
you can watch.
changes soon.
Like,
Yes.
I'm what, like Loser, that's rentable. I Could Never Be Your Woman.
Either way, I just wanted to give a heads
Rentable
up to
as
the
hell.
Oh
audience.
my God, you guys are going to finally canonically discuss
Vamps, rentable.
had the fact that she's butt crazy in love with Josh.
That's a movie where we're going to need to go 4 hours.
It seems it's going to go hog wild.
For the Clueless episode, could we have multiple changes?
Looks.
Yeah, I think we have to.
I don't know that we have to because
think we
you
have to.
don't. Maybe you're only the producer of the show, so you might have forgotten that this is an audio show.
It's important to the
The
authenticity.
sound of
Ben's
Polaroid
Ben's
snapping
agreed.
between
Ben-
every point.
I agree.
You'll feel that we're wearing a sportier look.
I'm so tired that I just said Ben's agree.
Can you
My
softly
brain
play
is like puttering.
Radiohead's Just in the background? Or is it fake? What are they? No, it's
I
not
believe
Just.
it's
That's
fake
way too
plastic
hard.
trees
They'd be
that's on
fake
the,
plastic trees,
the
right?
Clueless sound.
Just over and over again over the background of that episode.
Yeah, no, we'll license that. No problem.
Anyway, normal swing from Schindler's List to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Check back in for that next week. And on our Patreon, we're doing the Superman films.
No, we haven't actually kicked that off yet.
Really?
No.
My sense of timing is
Spoilers.
weird.
This episode, of course, is dropping April 20th. Ooh,
Okay.
420.
So
Hitler's
Hitler.
birthday.
It's also Hitler's birthday.
Good job, guys.
But we are about to drop a Galaxy Quest episode.
okay, well, we'll tell you what's
Um,
happening next after Galaxy Quest. Superman.
Superman is following that, beginning with the Richard Donner film. I'm seeing here that its title is Superman.
That's not what it's called.
What's
It's
it
called
called?
Superman: the Motion Picture. That is the official title. That is why the James Gunn movie is called simply Superman, because no film has ever had that title before.
Well, you're, I think, wrong. But
I think I'm right.
it was marketed as Superman: the movie.
Do you have
but
any
it-
strong
it is
thoughts about the
officially called
aesthetic of the trailer for Superman?
I'm not sure why he's chosen that particular color correction, and I hope he tweaks it a little bit. Otherwise, I'm looking
My
excited
God,
for
wait, I want to push the stop button.
it. Why is that?
I don't know, because this has been going on for
Ben,
so
are you
long.
excited for me to talk so much about Superman, though? A guy I really like, and a guy you probably think is a bit of a square.
I think
Yeah.
that movie is called
I do.
Superman: The Motion Picture. Are we going off of what it says in the opening of the film?
No. The film is called Superman.
Oh, right. Well, first of all, it's Superman the movie.
As I told you
Yeah.
2 minutes ago, you weren't listening.
Look,
But it was
going
only
to be thrilling conversation.
it was
for the
only
next couple of
marketed
months,
that way.
leading up to the release of the new James Gunn.
Ben, when we're done here, I'm going to
I
make
am
you be my
glad,
therapist for the afternoon. So
that the new
ready.
James Gunn
All
film
right.
is not called like Superman.
I'm just going to lie this
you
chair
know,
back.
Legacy. That's
Yeah,
what it almost was
Superman.
called.
I know, but like I was trying to think of a funnier version. Like Superman checks things out. You know, just this whole thing where they're like, Superman toddles forward. Superman begins something.
Well, First Steps is one of the worst
It's
subtitles.
so bad.
I think that
Really
trailer rules, and I'm very cautiously optimistic for that
excited.
movie. But here's my pitch: no subtitle necessary.
Fantastic Four's first steps. What happens in the movie? Galactus tries to eat Earth. Oh, is that what happens when you take your first step? What are you talking
What are you
about?
fucking talking about?
MCU's bulletproof right now. Can't go wrong.
Yeah. Let's all just quickly take our Rolk pills. We've gotten tense.
I must negotiate a treaty.
Do the pills stop him from being Rolk, or they make him Rolk?
They stop him from being wrong
Yeah.
and keep him as the great politician he is. Freedom. You've elected an 80 billion-year-old man.
The episode's over. Basta.
Basta.
Basta. Thank you all for listening. And as always, the podcast is live.
Blank Check with Griffin and David is hosted by Griffin Newman and David Sims. Our executive producer is me, Ben Hostley. Our creative producer is Marie Barty Salinas. And our associate producer is AJ McKeon. This show is mixed and edited by AJ McKeon and Alan Smithy. Research by JJ Birch. Our theme song is by Lane Montgomery and the Great American Novel, with additional music by Alex Mitchell. Artwork by Joe Bowen, Ollie Moss, and Pat Reynolds. Our production assistant is Minnick. Special thanks to David Cho, Jordan Fish, and Nate Patterson for their production help. Head over to blankcheckpod.com for links to all of the real nerdy shit. Join our Patreon, Blank Check Special Features, for exclusive franchise commentaries and bonus episodes. Follow us on social at Blank Check Pod. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Checkbook, on Substack. This podcast is created and produced by Blank Check Productions.